Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 10th of August. Today, a second data breach in Northern Ireland. Now the Chief Constable's under fire over concerns police officers have been put in danger.
Should ditching the European Convention on Human Rights be at the heart of the Tories' re-election campaign? That's what some cabinet members are demanding of the PM. Could it solve the immigration crisis?
And are you a guppy? Someone who's just given up on owning a property. We'll look at the housing crisis facing the under-40s.
And when it comes to sport, well, the Premier League is back tomorrow and the referees are going to be all about two things which I'm very, very strong on: timekeeping and discipline.
And the Premier League's back, and so is the sun, and we'll have your full forecast.
Hello, we'll see temperatures rising through the course of the day today. Find out exactly how high later on in the programme with me.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Isabel Webster, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
So, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
How was the holiday?
Very sunny. I think I timed it quite well. I've missed this wet patch that everybody's been experiencing, and now I've come back to sunshine.
Where are you, south of France?
Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, really nice.
Can you imagine? You were just saying that you were busy boozing on the flight home last night.
Well, I had a glass of wine, but of course on a flight you have to have a little mini bottle.
Oh, what a shame.
And it was about 6 o'clock in the evening. I thought everyone would be having a drink, but maybe everyone had had too much on their holidays. And it just seemed I was drinking alone.
Were you?
On the flight home. Yeah.
How many
There we
bottles
go.
did you have?
No, just the one.
Oh,
Just the one. I was working this morning.
Letting this side. I might not drink, but I like to drink vicariously
Really?
through you.
Well, there you go. I'll do that with pleasure.
Yeah, there you go. Lovely stuff. It's nice to have you back.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Let's take you through our top story this morning, should we? And the Police Federation for Northern Ireland says urgent answers are required after details emerged of a second major data leak containing the names of more than 200 serving officers and staff.
Well, this comes after the worst security breach in Northern Irish history, where the names and locations of the entire force were mistakenly put online for 3 hours.
Let's talk to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, who joins us now. I mean, Doogie, the fact that there has now been reported a second data breach, this has put an awful lot of pressure now on the Chief Constable.
You're totally correct, Stephen. That is exactly what's happening here. And that pressure will come today. Here behind us, this is where the policing board sits. That's that body that was set up under the Good Friday Agreement to examine and hold the PSNI responsible to local politicians. But of course, those local politicians are politicians when it goes down to it. They will love the investigation. They will always try to excuse themselves. So today we will probably see this Chief Constable coming in behind us here, and those politicians will say, we will wait for the investigation into this. And of course that investigation will be into the FOI side of the PSNI. Now the FOI side, the Freedom of Information, is run by civilians, but it will have a master, if you like, a boss that is inside the PSNI. And the executive of the PSNI, those executive management body that are around the Chief Constable, will face investigations. And there's no doubt about it, on a breach this size, somebody's head will have to roll for this because the sheer amount of money that will have to come out of the taxpayer's pocket to put this right will, I would imagine, be eye-watering in some stages. But last night we found out of the Police Federation that this laptop was stolen out of a car at the start of July with 200 officers' details on that particular laptop. Now, if you're doing jigsaw data analysis and you're putting stuff together, those bits and pieces of data that were released yesterday, along with the stuff out of the laptop, could put a lot of officers in a lot of danger. You've got to remember the threat level here is at severe. The IRA took many, many lives of police officers in Northern Ireland over many decades, and they are still targets, particularly to Republican organisations. So as much as all eyes will be on the policing board here today, I think we will hear a lot of political bluster, but really there is a scheduled meeting of the Police Federation, and that is the body that looks after rank and file officers, and they will be pushing for, number one, answers of the Chief Constable and his executive body, and number two, they will be laying down what they want out of this and how quickly they want it, because one of the biggest problems with rank and file officers is that they are very frustrated about how long disciplinary actions are taking, how much paperwork is in them, and how quickly, much quicker that can be done, so as officers aren't left hanging with court cases. So they will want to see a very, very quick answer to this. So the probability is that today at the policing board, things will go politically well. There'll be a lot of bluster, but the Police Federation this afternoon is the place to watch, and there we think they will probably take a similar line, but they will want it done within a matter of weeks, not months.
OK, Doogie, with that, thanks very much indeed. Now, the Prime Minister's facing calls to put membership of the European Convention on Human Rights at the heart of his election campaign.
Apparently, up to a third of the Cabinet believe continued ECHR membership is preventing Britain from protecting its borders against illegal immigration, with deportations to Rwanda, for example, hanging in the balance.
Let's get the views now of Leon Emirali, who joins us in the studio, political analyst. Good morning, good to see you, Leon. Are we seeing, do you think, a bit of a hardening of the position of the government at the moment on the ECHR?
Yeah, I think we are. I think what we're seeing is the government looking to project that they are doing everything they can to tackle illegal immigration, whether that's through legal or illegal means, as it currently is with the Rwanda policy. And I think they are looking to project that to the public, but they are also, exactly as you say, Isabel, hardening taking that stance on the European Convention of Human Rights, much similar to the way we saw with the European Union over the years. And I think this is a culmination, potentially, in the Tories throwing the kitchen sink at this, trying to find a breakthrough. And this talk of potentially leaving, I think, is going to be music to the ears of those on the right of the party, but will worry those in the middle.
Yeah, well, I mean, how realistic a prospect is it? Because it's been talked of for some time, but never actually happened. And we've got to differentiate. It's not actually anything to do with the EU, this, is it?
No, it's nothing to do with the European Union. It's actually a formation of the European Council. And, realistically, the European Convention on Human Rights, it's people's protection against the state. That's ultimately what it's there for. And I think it's quite worrying if we were to withdraw. We would be quite alone in doing so, in withdrawing. It'd be sort of us and Russia and other European states, who aren't necessarily conducive to that Western liberal democracy. So I think it is worrying, and I think when you look at what they are talking about, this sort of hardening stance around withdrawing altogether, I think it's potentially to win votes and isn't necessarily going to be an easy thing to do.
And just to be clear, if we were to withdraw from the ECHR, that wouldn't resolve the Rwanda deportation situation, would it? Because that's actually being, rejected by the court at the moment in this country, the Supreme Court.
Yes, although I think that the European Convention of Human Rights sort of sits above it, and it is a judge in Strasbourg who unilaterally stopped those deportation flights last year. So it certainly wouldn't be the silver bullet, but it would make things a lot easier. So that is obviously what the government is hoping happens. But, this is not going to be the be-all and end-all, and I think there could be unintended consequences of this when you look at, potentially what it would mean if we had a Prime Minister or a government led by, let's say, someone like Jeremy Corbyn. Then what does that mean in terms of people having access to a free trial, people having access to protections against the state? And I think it's a very slippery slope.
Yeah, and you can understand the worries, you can understand the unintended consequences, but you can also understand the frustration of people, can't you? That we have a sovereign government that cannot actually enact what certainly a lot of people in the country want to see happen.
Well, Stephen, this reminds me a little bit of Henry VIII. When he wanted his way and he left the Catholic Church. I think it's a similar thing with this. You can't come up with a policy that is against the law, and your answer to that is to leave the court that sets those laws. I think there has to be another way forward, and I think it's on the government now to come up with creative ideas where they can actually perhaps park the Rwanda policy to one side, look at other means of being able to stop illegal immigration into the country, and that should satisfy everyone.
And Leon, when we talk about a third of the cabinet supposedly in favour of ditching the ECHR, any idea of sort of names of who we might suspect among those?
I imagine there's one name at the very top of that. I think no surprises. Suella Braverman, I imagine the Home Secretary, is pushing for that. I mean, this Rwanda policy really does have her hallmark all over it. So for her to have a success in this particular policy, I think she is pushing for that. I think it is definitely those on the right of the cabinet, and I would imagine that there is some resistance perhaps from the more moderates, the likes of Penny Mordaunt, perhaps, actually, who I imagine would want to stay part of the ECHR. But it's another issue where there is a split in the cabinet. The Tories don't look unified, and that's a problem heading into an election.
I tell you what, though, it could be a vote winner, but purely because of the frustration that people are feeling. People are feeling like we're not getting anything done, and we're being hampered in what we do. Therefore, you can see it as a... I don't know what you say about unintended consequences, people not necessarily understand exactly what it all means. However, it could win a few votes over.
It could do, and I think this is why it's slightly worrying, because I think it is actually popular when you poll the public, on that question alone. But it's then when you look at the deeper consequences of it, and it does really underpin the sort of whole judiciary in this country. And I think if we were to leave that, it would have consequences people perhaps haven't considered. But you're quite right, Stephen. I saw a poll on Twitter. I saw a poll on, I think it was a Telegraph website. It seems as though it's very popular that people do want to leave, but I think that's just on the Rwanda question alone, and it would cover much, much more than that if we were to.
OK.
I was just going to ask a final question about Lee Anderson and his acknowledgement, as he put it, that the government was failing on curbing the problem of illegal immigration. Robert Jenrick biting back against that. But yet, Number 10, not really that critical of perhaps some of his language, more colourful language in all of this.
It's, again, that Tory disunity, isn't it? And it's not a good look to have Deputy Chairman of the party going up against a Home Office Minister. And yes, I think Lee Anderson's language was unparliamentary, and I think that's sort of fairly fair to see. But then again, perhaps the point behind that language was valid, and a lot of people would resonate with it. So I don't think Number 10 are going to necessarily give more to Lee Anderson than a slap on the wrist and let him move on. And that's part of his appeal. It's the way that he does reach a part of the audience that perhaps Rishi Sunak can't.
Yeah, OK. Leanne, thanks very much indeed. Let us know what you think.
Yes.
I mean, about that Lee Anderson comment. It's an interesting one. Is he just... It's not parliamentary language, is it? It's not the way we do things normally. But is he just saying what you think?
Well,
Which
and
is,
also,
you know, part of the point.
Yeah, but I actually think what was more shocking was to have somebody as senior as him, you know, deputy chair of the Conservative Party, saying that the government had failed when they're a year away from an election. To me, that was almost more of the headline out of all of it. Let us know what you think. Those are our thoughts this morning. GBViews at gbnews.com.
Now, if you enjoyed yesterday's warm weather, it's going to get even hotter this week, apparently. Temperatures set to rise above 24 degrees.
Heaven forbid, it's August after all, but will it be short-lived? The Met Office is predicting we'll be getting a band of more thunderstorms next week. Yeah. Well, let's speak to meteorologist Jim Dell. He's here to tell us what's in store. Good morning to you, Jim, from a very sunny backdrop. Where are you this morning and how long can we enjoy the sunshine for?
Hi, good morning, guys. I'm on the Rye in High Wycombe, which is a big open space. There's some nice woods behind me here, which I often go walking or running in. So yeah, there's not many people around at the moment, but it's a lovely morning. The sun's just coming up behind my shoulder there, over the trees. So yeah, it's going to be one of those days I think we can embrace.
Oh, thank heavens for that. So give us the bad news. How short-lived is this going to be, Jim?
Well, OK, so this is the peak day. You mentioned 24. I'm going to say, well, actually, 10 days ago, I think I broadcast that I said today might well reach 30 degrees. Now, I'm not sure it will. 28 is probably going to be the mark, around that sort of area. Lincolnshire down to the southeast. And maybe, you know, I think for most parts of the country, it's going to be right up there. But in terms of how long it's going to last, do you know what? I actually think now, from now on in, we're going to ebb and flow between what you might call this really sort of beautiful kind of weather and then the troughs that come. So much more like we're used to in the UK in terms of seeing temperate type weather, changeable out of the Atlantic and then getting some nice days as well like we've got today. So, yeah, I don't think it's all bad news, Stephen. I think...
Oh, that is quite bad news.
That's quite bad news. No sunshine anymore.
Mind you, that's enough of what you need to know from Jim. Let's be honest, it's not going to be as bad as we thought.
Oh, we've got him back. We'll have a final question, Tim, because we often, if we're having a bad summer, Jim, we look to September with all our hopes of talk of Indian summers. Do you think long-term, you know, we might get a bit more of a sunshine in the later part of the year?
Yeah, do you know what? I see September as being the new summer month. I really do. I think climate change has nudged that little bit on, which means that we can embrace September. It's probably going to be overdue in terms of giving us some high pressure that we've not seen for a long time. So I think absolutely there's no reason why that we can't continue to look to September. Don't pack all your stuff away at the end of, you know, when the schools go back and think that's the end of it and we're heading to winter. Yeah, we don't see as much of the sun. Obviously, it rises a little bit later and sets a little bit earlier. But nonetheless, I think we can say that there's plenty to come. We won't see a 40-degree this year, that's for sure. That's for other parts. Looking down to Spain and Turkey this week, today and this week, in terms of maybe some record temperatures down there if you're going down there. And I say record, all-time record. But for ourselves, I think this 24, 25, 26 is where we are at this moment in time. I think will be repeated several times throughout August and maybe into September as well.
Well, that's something to look forward to. Enjoy a lovely day, Jim. Make the most of it. Thanks very much.
It's a good point as well.
Thank you.
This weather's going to continue into September. All those garden furniture sales and all that kit says don't put it away yet, but you can get it almost half price now.
Can you?
So you're going to get a few more weeks out of them.
Oh, you've been shot. You've been looking round, have you?
I've been looking for some garden furniture.
There you go.
There you go. It's a top tip.
Well, it's nice. We were only saying last night that we've got some sort of like a nice set outside with a fire. You know, those have got a fire in the table.
Yeah. Haven't used it once.
Haven't used it once this year. Haven't had the barbecue out once this year. Nothing.
Right, we'll keep it out. We've heard it here first. We're going to have another 6 weeks of summer. Fingers crossed.
Yes, with just 1 or 2 thunderstorms in between. Now, it's 6:16. In the United States, a man who posted violent threats against President Biden online has been killed during an FBI raid in Utah. Agents were attempting to serve an arrest and search warrant against Craig Robertson ahead of President Biden's arrival in the state. They say he posted threats on Facebook against the president and a prosecutor pursuing criminal charges against Donald Trump.
Wildfires fanned by winds of a distant hurricane have killed at least 6 people and devastated much of the resort city of Lahaina on Hawaii's Maui Island. Thousands have been forced to evacuate as some fled into the ocean to escape the smoke and flames.
And a Virgin Galactic pioneered rocket plane is due to fly from New Mexico today, carrying an 80-year-old British Olympian, along with an Aberdeen student and her mum, into space. If all goes well, it will be the company's second commercial flight and the first to carry paying customers instead of trained astronauts.
You'd love to go on that flight, wouldn't you? That's an absolute bucket list dream for you.
It is a bucket list dream. I tell you what, I can't quite get my head round. Is that mother and her daughter going up? For 2 reasons. One is after what we saw with the submarine. And you sort of think families doing that sort of very risky thing together. But the other thing is the money. The money. Well, I spoke to Richard Branson about these flights, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now, and they were then £250,000 each.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
So they're forking out £500,000 to go up on that.
But, you know, you're so right. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I'm not sure 2 members of one family is the best idea. Not that we think anything's going to happen to them.
No.
You would be prepared to put yourself in there, so you must have a certain amount of confidence. I personally would never do that. It would be a long time before I could be tempted up into one of those, but it'd be fascinating to see how it goes.
You'll be doing it eventually.
Do you reckon?
Because it'll be the quickest way to travel around the world and things.
If it's tried and tested and everyone's doing it in a while, maybe I'll think about it. But I'm becoming a more nervous flyer, just normal flying as I've got older.
Really?
Yeah. We talked about it on the programme. No, 1 glass of wine. I think it's just because we've seen this increase in turbulence on flights now because there's all this erratic weather. And where I've just been in the south of France, so windy the whole time. They're windier than any of the locals are used to, which meant the sea was really cold. But it means flying has become a bit more scary, and I'm more of a nervous flyer. So going on one of those, not sure I'm there yet.
There's no turbulence that high up.
Just G-force.
There's no air. You're fine. It's not turbulence. No, I'd give it a whirl, but unfortunately, can't afford it. If you fancy it, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com. Let's get a full outlook on the weather for you today with Greg.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. So the day ahead is looking fine and dry for many. Plenty of sunny spells, feeling much warmer than it has done for many weeks now. And this morning, yes, there is a little bit of low cloud initially, but this should lift and break. And most places having a fine day ahead. Plenty of blue skies. Yes, the cloud will come and go at times across northern England, parts of Scotland, and then will thicken across some western parts later on. Perhaps an afternoon shower developing over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, but most places dry, and those temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s, 28 to 29 Celsius possible towards the southeast this afternoon. We've not seen those temperatures for quite some time. Into the evening, though, we do see a weather front moving into the west, and this will give some rain to Northern Ireland and then parts of Wales, western Scotland, southwest England, slowly pushing its way north and eastwards through the night. Some of this rain could be heavy at times, particularly across Scotland, very little in the south, and another warm, muggy night to come. Temperatures minimum around 17 or 18 degrees. So a bit of a cloudier start to Friday. There will be some bright or sunny spells. Rain, though, across northern England and Scotland. This pushing out the way, and then it will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers across the country. Showers most frequent in the brisk breeze towards the north and the west, some of these heavy at times. Some places will stay dry, and in the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, temperatures around 25 or 26 Celsius. So still feeling quite warm here, a little fresher towards the northwest.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up, we've got all the sport for you with Paul Coit.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
6:24, good morning to you. Still to come today, are you a guppy? That's someone who's given up on owning a property. We'll look at the housing crisis facing the under-40s.
And then we'll be asking, is breast best? This comes after a mother was told to stop breastfeeding her 6-week-old baby on a flight. What do you think? Would you be offended by somebody breastfeeding? Get in touch in all the usual ways. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
All right, let's get the sport for you this morning. Coit is here.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Holiday.
It's nice to be back, yeah.
You're the only one who's just been working.
I know you have been working very hard, but Isabel is so much browner than I am, though. Why is that?
Well, to be fair, you were browner when you came in.
Yeah. Well, I just want to take it down a little bit. I was told, listen, I was told when I came in, whatever you do, don't out-tan Izzy.
Oh,
was the phrase. So I've decided to step. It is in the writing. So I thought I'd step away and not out-tan you anyway whatsoever.
Right. You had a lovely time.
I did have a lovely time. Thank you very much. But it is lovely to be back.
If you don't,
go on.
I was going to say, if you don't crack on,
yes,
we're going to need added time.
Fine. I see what you're doing. See, the magic is still there.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about, because the Premier League begins again tomorrow. So the first game, Burnley versus Manchester City, but as I mentioned earlier, it's timekeeping and discipline. So as far as the referees are concerned, they're going to crack down, and we've spoken about this, Isabel. I know that you feel this way about rugby, that it's better referee when it comes to discipline.
Respect.
In rugby, it's all about respect. Whereas we have in football, you get complaints and this and that, and you get players crowding the referee. All this has got to stop. So what they're going to do, to cut a long story short, is brandish, and this is the only time I ever hear the word brandish, is brandish cards, brandish the yellow card, because it's the only way that it's actually going to stop.
And that's for misbehaviour specifically towards referees?
To referees and to each other, and also the other thing is about timekeeping, because the games, it was during the World Cup, that games started going longer. It obviously is a 90-minute match, but then they start going to 100 minutes, maybe some are even 110 minutes. And the reason for that is just because a lot of time wasting that goes on. You know, you get again, something that would be missing in rugby, where you have the players rolling around for a while. You know, they may be 1-0 up and just waste a bit of time. The referee is not going to accept any of that. So there's going to be more yellow cards involved in that, and also there'll be time added on. So, for example, if there's a celebration for a goal, how long do you think the average time for a celebration for a goal? I mean, if it was me, I'd probably do like a good 15 minutes, I think. Okay. Celebration. So the average time for a celebration, would you say, is how long?
Do a quick sort of wave to the crowd.
Yeah. Shirt off, wave it around.
Mates,
I reckon
give it 5 minutes.
I reckon it's
5 minutes?
Yeah, I reckon it's 4 or 5.
60. It's only 65 seconds.
Is it?
5 minutes is long.
Well,
Yes,
65 seconds is as long as it should be.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they're even saying that goes on too long.
Yeah.
That get back and they'll add it on. So the average length, they say, of a game in the Premier League this year will be 101 minutes. It should be 90, but it basically means that there's more time that we can watch the game instead of it just ball being out of play and then not watching.
If that celebration's going on more than 65 seconds or whatever it is, you're going to yellow card them?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you can get yellow carded for taking the shirt off,
right.
which was always my favourite way of celebrating, as you know, which I've now had to curtail that.
Rein that in.
But I know, I just had to. That's it. So you can get yellow carded for that, and so it's just cracking down. And the whole idea is to make the game quicker, more exciting, and therefore better for the spectator as well, which is very good. Yellow card. Okay, fine. What is that for, though? What was it for?
Talking
Indiscipline?
about taking your shirt off.
Just talking about taking your shirt off. Disgusting. And also the other thing is that I should mention this. They have ball assistant. We would know them as ball boys and ball girls. Now, ball assistants. So they're ball assistants, and the ball assistants will have cones behind them with about 8 balls behind them. The fourth official will also have honestly, there's going to be balls everywhere. So should the ball go out of play, there's the ball back in.
Well, there you go. It saves messing about.
In fact, a ball for every member of the crowd will have one as well. So that's
throw them all in.
Absolutely, chuck them all in.
Should we mention Harry Maguire?
Yeah, we should mention Harry.
Transfer action?
Yeah, Harry Maguire at Manchester United. Out favourite at Manchester United has been for quite some time. So Harry Maguire, it looks pretty much a done deal. He's going to be going to West Ham, so for £30 million. So expect that to happen today. And also James Ward-Prowse, who is a terrific midfielder, plays for Southampton. He's going to be doing the same trip as well. He's going from Southampton to West Ham too. He's a player who's worth having because he's such a brilliant dead ball specialist. In other words, scoring free kicks. He's so good. I just think it's worth having him in your team if he does nothing throughout the whole game. And he's a good player, so we would do more. It's like having a penalty every time he gets a free kick. So it's a very good signing for West Ham. Although they're talking about Luis Paquetá, who is their attacking midfielder from Brazil. A very good chance that he could be going to Manchester City because they're sniffing around him at the moment. So there's that as well.
The World Cup.
Yes.
Now, we're not playing again till
Saturday morning, 11:30.
I tell you what, I think it's been a bit lacklustre from England. I mean, we've got through the last 8, which is great.
Yep.
However, it's not been the strongest performance.
I don't think we need to worry about this because... No, I really don't, because going back on history, and we could go back as far as 66, we can talk about Italian 90, it's all about momentum. So when you have teams that often start very quietly, not making too much fuss, it builds. So I'm fairly confident that we're going to do OK. I mean, the Lionesses, we're obviously going to be one of the favourites now. You've got the USA out, you know, all the problems with them. Sweden are going to be playing, they've got Japan, who are former winners, so that's tomorrow, Spain and the Netherlands. So slowly. You don't want to go to it. So it's just a little build, a little bit. Lauren James getting sent off, of course, was a disaster for us, but it's just a slow build. Colombia, we should beat.
Right, OK, that was my question was going to be, where do we stand versus Colombia? But
my predictions have always been particularly terrible, though, haven't they? But we should be OK. I really am confident with that.
I'm going to trust you.
I just think a little better. One other sport. Now, since I've been in America the last couple of weeks, and obviously it's a lot of reconnaissance and a lot of research I've been doing onto my work. You know that. And I was watching, actually in a bar, doing research again. And you know, you get on in bars, you get TVs. Back in the day, show videos. A lot of American sport on there. So they show a lot of baseball. And there was another sport I found very interesting.
Right.
professional pillow fighting. This was actually on TV. I think we've got. Have we got any clips or pictures of this? I don't think it probably leaves too much to imagination. There it is.
Oh, wow,
there's the swinging of the pillow, because I know with the anti-Joshua fight we've had problems with drug testing. I think they'd probably be drug tested for nitol, maybe, in that situation.
Possibly.
I've been saving that one. But anyway, there we are. Good. The swinging of the pillow, and it does get very dangerous. It's a professional organisation. They call it the was it the PFA now? The Professional Fighting, the Pillow Fighting Association. So I'd just like to be just making sure I know what's going on. So should it all of a sudden take off, we'll be all over.
All right at that.
I could.
What do you think?
Oh yeah. Well, I say use a temper pillow. That's
a weighty pillow.
What's that?
Do you know, like a temper mattress? You can get
it's like
temper
a memory
pillows.
foam. Also, they're quite heavy.
They're heavy.
See that?
Floor someone.
I think that would be.
Fight you in a pillow fight then.
Well, heavyweight fighting. So the heavyweights would have the temper pillow, and probably the lightweights a little thin pillow, a little eider down there, just a little tap. But it's very dangerous. It sounds fun, but it can get very, very dangerous.
I don't think it's going to catch on over
I
here.
don't, but I could probably watch that.
Can you imagine the cord of a pillow in the eye though? Could get whipped around.
A lot of technique.
Yeah, I know.
Skill there.
Well, just having a little look at it. Yeah.
There you go.
There we are. That's the future of sport.
Love it. Paul, as always, thank you very much.
Now, stay with us. We've got lots more still to come, including a guppy, someone who's given up on owning a property. Tell you more in a minute.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 6:34. Good morning to you. Let's have a look at some of the newspapers this morning.
Oh, let's start with the Daily Mail, shall we? It's leading with the good news that 4 of Britain's biggest lenders cut rates on home loans.
The Telegraph says up to a third of the PM's cabinet wants him to put leaving the European Convention of Human Rights at the centre of the next general election campaign.
The Guardian's reporting many students who were affected by the pandemic are now being forced to live at home due to the cost of living crisis.
The Mirror says more bullying claims have been made over the work environment at ITV. MPs have been told there was a toxic culture of harassment and discrimination.
And here's the Times. It's leading with the call from the Metropolitan Police Chief Constables as they want more power to sack officers who are unfit to serve. The Met's Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says this was held back by reform delays.
OK, let's go through some of those then with political consultant Emma Burnell and the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's kick off with the Times. And lawyers are soft.
Yeah, I mean, the Times has gone for quite a Times headline there, focusing on the lawyer part. Basically, Mark Rowley is trying to turn the Met around. And I think we can all agree that that's something that definitely needs to happen. And he's become increasingly frustrated because he doesn't have the power to sack officers who he feels are both failing or not fit for the culture that he's trying to create in the Met.
Not have the power?
Because there has long been a sense, and you can understand sort of why, that the police shouldn't mark their own homework. And if you think about some of the other cases that we've been talking about recently, for example, that man who was found that his case had been, he'd been wrongly charged with rape. He'd been in prison for 10 years longer than his sentence because he refused to say that he'd done it. And that, again, was a case of the police marking their own homework. They hadn't given the proper information to the defence that they'd needed to do their job properly. So you can see why there's a sense that the police should not mark their own homework, but there are very few organisations in which the chief executive does not have a say over hiring and firing. And if you are in a position where your workforce has been found to have all these institutional problems, it must be so frustrating to not have that power.
So who has that ultimate power then?
There's a separate body which is largely, this is where the lawyers, the soft bit comes in, because it's a legal wrangling. And of course, any employee has the right to representation and to, you shouldn't be sacked summarily, because that too could be abused. So there has to be a system, but that system could be internal, it could be quicker, it could be speeded up, and this is what Mark Rowley is complaining about.
Yeah, it seems a strange situation to be in where the police can't get rid of bad apples, which everyone's been calling for.
Well, and it taps into something the Tories are now trying to do quite a lot, which is give more power to chief constables, give more power to senior police figures to take big decisions, to change the culture within their institutions. And it's probably only a good thing, but it's like a lot of Tory things, it's something that they've been in power for a long time. Why haven't they been doing it earlier? Is it because people are starting to trust Labour more on law and order, which is traditionally a Tory strong suit? Quite possibly.
Freddie, staying with you and the Telegraph, leading with the story we've been discussing this morning, about a third of, we believe, members of the Cabinet calling on the Prime Minister to ditch membership of the European Convention on Human Rights.
Well, yeah, this is another lawyers are soft story, I think, which is that actually, we can talk about, barges, having people on barges, hotels, how we solve the refugee crisis, the asylum seeker crisis that we have in this country. And it boils down to a very bigger problem, which is that it's actually very difficult to deport people. Even if you take the decision to deport them, there will be legal checks on it. And so in the end, about 76-80% of cases, appeals are won, and asylum seekers get asylum. That means that we are a magnet for asylum seekers. It's a good thing. It means that Britain is a kind country. We all agree on that. But at some stage, this problem has to be addressed, and there's a lot of people in the Tory party, including, according to Telegraph, a third of the Cabinet, who think that this cannot be done without pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights.
What do you think, Emma?
Well, there are two countries that are not in Europe who are not members of the ECHR, Belarus and Russia. Is that a club we really want to join?
That's not a reason for staying in it, though.
It's not a reason for staying in it, but there are a reason those two countries with incredibly nasty, repressive, human rights abusive regimes are not members of it. And, that is a worry to me. There are lots of ways that we could and should be dealing with the increases in migration. But again, also, we are not alone in Europe in having this. We always think that we're getting more than anybody else. That's just not true. Statistically, it's absolutely not true. There are people coming through Europe to us. There are people going and staying in other parts of Europe. Where I think that this is a political headache is that if 1/3 of the Cabinet want this, that means 2/3 don't. And probably about half of those, so 1/3 of the Cabinet and 1/3 of the Tory party, will be really staunchly against this. And what you don't want to do is go into an election year with something that's going to divide your party quite so passionately. You need to have everyone singing from the same hymn sheet at this point.
Right, yeah, but don't we need to look at it? I mean, Stephen's been in touch. I don't know if he's right or not. He says it's not leaving the ECHR is not a slippery slope. We've had better human rights laws in the UK for centuries. The judge in Strasbourg made his decision on political grounds, not lawful grounds.
Well, yes. I mean, I think that the ECHR was 1951, was it? I think it was 1951. It was speaking to a world that was very different to the world we're in now. The global migration flows are very, very different. And I think they're feeling, and you're quite right to point out that only Russia and Belarus are not part of it, but there's a lot of European leaders, Meloni in Italy, Macron in France as well, are starting to talk about migration and suggesting that the current legislation, current international laws are very restrictive when it comes to dealing with this. And I don't think we're in a situation where Britain is suddenly going to start being unbelievably cruel towards people who are desperate in the world. And there are a lot of very desperate people in the world. I don't think we're suddenly going to become a country that lets people, drown trying to get to us wherever we can. That's happening. It's happening. We have this crisis. We have this global immigration crisis. And current international legislation is not helping us deal with it. And I think a lot of leaders are doing it. And I think Rishi Sunak actually has quite a good opportunity to be at the forefront of saying we need to revise, reframe international legislation. This doesn't need to make us some sort of international pariah.
If his illegal migration bill had worked as he intended, it gives ministers this power to overrule these pyjama injunctions, as they're called, these Section 39s, which allow these duty lawyers at the last minute to prevent these deportation flights, for example. So that we shouldn't need to leave the ECHR if that is in place, surely.
Well, that's been Number 10's hope, but I think a lot of Tories are saying, actually, look, we can say that the legal migration bill will get us round this, but at the moment it isn't. And there seems to be too many obstacles to it to make us do it. So it's a sort of nuclear option in a way that I think increasingly a lot of Tories are thinking they're going to have to take.
But also, don't confuse our refugee obligations, which is the International Convention on Refugees and Asylum, with the human rights, which protect our human rights in the UK. We need to be really conscious of what we'd be giving up if we just said, oh, let's leave it with nothing to talk about. There are conversations that we're going to need to have, because this century is going to see a lot more migration patterns and very changed ones because of things like climate change. So let's absolutely have those conversations about how we manage that, but let's have them internationally.
But what would we be giving up?
Well, we'd be giving up protection of our human rights, unless we put something in our own laws. And that's not the conversation that we're having at the moment. We have that largely protected through having the ECHR, and that again is grandfathered into our laws. But there's no guarantee it would stay that way.
Right, well, we'd have to
put that in as a caveat,
yes,
more fully, but we want to try and squeeze some other stories.
Let's have a look at the cost of living, Emma, in The Guardian this morning, looking at the COVID generation of students forced to sort of live at home.
So, 1/3 of students are staying at home. This was a trend that was already happening, but it seems to have been massively increased. And these are kids who've already been battered through doing their A-levels through COVID, doing their GCSEs through COVID.
All right, so why are they staying at home then? Because you think they'd be more desperate to leave?
Well, absolutely, and I'm not sure that they're not desperate to leave. They just can't afford to leave. So many people are finding that people are staying at home well into their 20s, when it used to be the tradition you left at 18 either to get a job or to go and study. One of the reasons that I've always been so passionate about having university opened up to as many people as possible is because it's always been that great sort of halfway house between leaving home and you're in quite a safe and managed way, discovering yourself, and that, to me, should always have been open to as many people as possible, no matter what your class background. But there's so many people are staying at home longer and longer and longer, unable to just afford the basics.
It's pretty common, isn't it, in Europe for people to do that? I think of friends in Holland where all of them were living at home whilst they were doing their degrees. And, we're talking about guppies as well in a minute, these people who have given up the idea of home ownership under 40. And again, that's pretty much the standard on the continent, isn't it? People are more familiar with renting. I wonder if we're just sort of... Our identity is changing in a way. We're not necessarily travelling away for university or hoping to own a home in the future.
Yes, I think Britain is unique in that you're seen as a bit, or you often were seen as a bit odd if you were living at home for too long. On the continent, it's different. But the rise of the guppies is a problem in that you're getting people now who are getting to the stage in their lives where they want to have families themselves, and properties aren't big enough to have enormous families living with each other. But then, you know, maybe we do need to revise the way we think about these things, and maybe living at home until you're 28, 30 is the norm. I'm not sure I'd like to have done that.
How many kids?
Much as I love my parents.
I love my mum and dad to bits and pieces. We'd all have killed each other.
Yeah, literally bits and pieces. Yes. Let's have just a quick look at this in the Mirror this morning, Freddie. Another set of bullying claims at ITV.
Yeah, there's another one of these TV bullying scandals that you're just such a happy ship at GBNews that I don't think we need to dwell on it.
No worries here.
I think the story here is that Philip Schofield had dinner with Vanessa Feltz.
Yes.
And this seems to be of great interest to people. And the Mirror have turned this story into a bullying story about ITV. There's lots of claims of bullying this morning. Again, we don't have the precise allegations. It obviously has been a very unhappy ship. And I just wonder if every few weeks we're going to be talking about a kind of TV scandal story. I don't know. You guys are the experts. Tell me what you think.
Oh, I just think it's August. And they're
Yes.
trying to talk about.
Philip Schofield.
They've got 2 TV stars on the front of the Mirror this morning, and you think there mustn't be an awful lot knocking about today.
They had dinner in Chiswick.
Oh,
Chiswick, did they?
So it was not like he's falling out of a Zone 1 nightclub. You just think, OK, look, the guy did some stuff that was wrong, and I get it, and I think he's been punished. But it's not like he should be walking through the streets with someone ringing a bell saying shame after him everywhere he goes. You know, let him have dinner in Chiswick.
Yeah.
There we go.
But it's. I do think a lot of these stars bring it on themselves, you know.
In what way?
I tell you what really wound me up is Vanessa. I mean, God love her. Vanessa Feltz has been through the ringer recently, but she was promoting an article she's written, and she did something on Instagram that I saw, and it was all about, and you won't believe how much support I've had from my celebrity friends. And this celebrity rang me, and this celebrity rang. Like, who cares about your celebrity friends? What about your real friends, Vanessa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all just about selling. It's about selling a story. It's all PR.
And in the way that everybody now is a sort of broadcaster. So
and of course, you know who was saying that to me
up.
just the other day, Stephen? It was Stephen Scorsese.
Do you know what I mean? But it's stuff like that. I just, oh, come on, Vanessa, you've had a really rough time, but we don't care which celebrities have messaged you. What about your real friends who are looking after you?
Well, and what worries you, if you have to do that, where are your real friends?
Oh, well, yeah. That is a worry.
Right, Freddie and Emma are real friends. We will see more from both of them just after 7:30. But for now, we're going to reflect, actually, some of the views that have been coming in this morning discussing the ECHR as we have this morning. Sean from Bridlington talking about Lee Anderson. He said he's 100% right. Our continued membership of the ECHR is more pernicious than purely its frustrating of the Rwanda policy. It's not just the ECR that's the problem. It was Tony Blair enshrining it into UK law that needs reversing first.
No, very interesting point. Keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, have you given up on your plans of owning your own home? We're asking because a study has revealed that 4 in 10 of us under 40 have abandoned the dream of getting onto the property ladder.
Well, here to tell us why is the Chief Executive of Generation Rent, Ben Twomey. And it is tough out there, isn't it, if you want to try and own your own home?
It's incredibly tough, and we have to come up with new, cute names to mask the reality in people's lives. You know, these are people's homes we're talking about. It's the foundation of your life, of how you can live a productive and fulfilled life. And people are spending more and more years, even decades, in the rented sector now. That would be fine if you got the same things that people want from home ownership, if you had a sense of security, if you had a quality home and it was affordable as well. But really, that's just not the case at the moment.
But are we overthinking it because we're British? And we have this idea of owning our own home, which Isabel was saying before, on the continent, doesn't exist in the same way.
I really wouldn't say it's overthinking it. I think it's fairly straightforward. This is the promise that many governments have made, is that they're going to enable people to follow that dream of having their own home, make it into a reality, not just a dream. But beyond that, as I say, in the rented sector, that would be fine if it was an attractive offer. It's not really a choice right now. People have to stay in the rented sector because they can't afford to get a deposit. They can't afford to go into home ownership. That drives down quality because they're forced into it and they don't don't have any other choices.
I know some of this was I know some of this was driven by the subprime mortgage market, and as the deposits went up as a result, and all the rest of it. But the price is it just the price of homes, which is actually the biggest problem here, because there's so many multiples of our salary now.
It's a complex picture, but the combination of the price of homes, which have gone up by about 72% in the last 10 years, so an enormous increase, and you've got to get that deposit together. Couple that with the fact that rents are soaring to their highest levels that there's ever been. How on earth can you save to get that deposit if you are renting at the moment? It feels like to renters pushing a boulder up a hill that keeps getting steeper and steeper.
So what's the answer to all of this, then? Is it just a thing of the past, perhaps, then? Are people under 40 ever getting to own a property?
There's no, this is a fairly new phenomenon. We've come up with a new word for it. It's clearly something that doesn't have to be the case. Nowhere is it written that we have to be in this situation. There's a housing crisis that requires urgent action. In order to do that, you've got to build more homes. You've got to build more particularly affordable homes and social homes that will enable people to either get into home ownership.
Yes, to be at the moment.
Well, that's
we
the
talk
thing.
about this a lot.
That's the thing, if we talk about guppies, giving up on property, it's governments that have given up on property. It's governments that haven't built enough homes for that.
It's democracy, isn't it? And a lot of, certainly if you talk to Michael Gove, he'll say he's desperate to build more houses, but the constituents in many of his own party's, seats just simply don't want to have new homes built there.
Yeah, well, we're getting into a situation now where, for some renters, so particularly thinking about key workers, who, of course, just a couple of years ago, everyone was clapping on their doorsteps, those people, on their median salaries, are struggling to afford to stay in certain towns or certain boroughs of their city. And that's a major problem, because it's going to mean that people who are working in our schools, who are working in our shops, our postal workers, are having to move out of the area. Who's going to do those jobs? There's a real case for making sure that there is building in places, but government needs to be pushing it, because there's a national crisis. It can't just be down to local areas to come up with the solutions.
I mean, there is actually a huge problem just for renters at the moment, isn't there? Because rents are going up. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that landlords are getting rid of properties because they can't afford the mortgage payments on them because of the current economic crisis. It's like a vicious circle.
Yeah, we're seeing an enormous kind of increase in the number of people who are being evicted through Section 21 notices. That often happens when a landlord may be choosing to sell their property. That's a major problem. The government promised to get rid of those evictions 4 years ago. We're still waiting for the law to go through to change that.
But how can you... I mean, sorry, forgive me, but how can you... You've got to also have an eye on what the landlord is doing and in their favour, if you like. How can you have a situation where no tenant can be evicted?
We're not looking for that situation. There can be grounds for eviction, so to reclaim the property, and that is in the current Renters Reform Bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment. Section 21 of the Housing Act 1988, that is basically a no-fault eviction, so it's arbitrary. The landlord can do that whenever they want. We're talking about people staying in rented properties for decades now, so if we are saying that the situation has changed for people, we need to be in a situation where they can feel secure in their own home. They can't be kicked out within 8 weeks at the drop of a hat.
And do you think this is going to be a big issue at the election next year? And if so, do you think any of the parties have woken up to how big a deal this is for younger voters?
I think this is going to be a huge issue, and it's testament to media and journalists like yourselves having us on this show to talk about this issue. It's clearly high on the agenda for people. We're in the cost of living crisis. Many people saying this is going to be a cost of living election. It's a cost of renting crisis within that. So any party that doesn't address that is really missing a trick. And there's 13 million renters in the UK renting privately. Those people are going to have a vote at the next election.
But what we are seeing then, presumably, I mean, with your solutions of saying, well, you've got to build more houses and make things more affordable, none of that happens quickly. So for those people who are renting, struggling, desperate to get out now, there's no light at the end of the tunnel yet.
Yeah, so one of the things that would be really helpful for that choice, as I say, is stopping the arbitrary evictions. That's something where, when mortgage interest rates did rise, the government was very quick to step in and say they're going to stop repossessions, or they're going to give a grace period for repossessions. Nothing like the same action for renters. You're also looking at the building of houses, as I say, but there's also houses that exist. If landlords are selling up, the bricks and mortar doesn't just sink into the ground. Government, local councils, they could be buying up these properties, making them available for renters as well, making sure that you're not losing supply too.
If someone's watching this and they are feeling hopeless about their prospects of, getting the keys to something that they can call their own, is there anything that they can do, or is this simply a matter that is out of their hands?
everyone has to make choices in what they can do. Sadly, that means that some people have to consider moving out of the area they may have grown up in or where they work, moving further away, downsizing, choices like that. So I'd ask everyone to probably consider what they can do at the moment. The hope really needs to come from government to take action on this. But also we're trying to build that voice. As you say, the general election is coming up. We're Generation Rents, an organisation that's also building a movement of renters that are trying to be heard, making sure that people know that this isn't good enough. This isn't just the way that things change so that we're left in insecure, unaffordable, low-quality accommodation. This needs to have action now.
OK. Look, we've got to leave it there, unfortunately, because there's loads more we could have asked you on that. There's about Section 8 and all sorts of stuff which is coming up. Ben Toomey, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Indeed. If you're a renter, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com.
And if you want to know what the weather's up to today, let's tune in now to Greg Dewhurst.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. So the day ahead is looking fine and dry for many. Plenty of sunny spells, feeling much warmer than it has done for many weeks now. And this morning, yes, there is a little bit of low cloud initially, but this should lift and break. And most places having a fine day ahead. Plenty of blue skies. Yes, the cloud will come and go at times across northern England, parts of Scotland, and then will thicken across some western parts later on. Perhaps an afternoon shower developing over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, but most places dry, and those temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s, 28 to 29 Celsius possible towards the southeast this afternoon. We've not seen those temperatures for quite some time. Into the evening, though, we do see a weather front moving into the west, and this will give some rain to Northern Ireland and then parts of Wales, western Scotland, southwest England, slowly pushing its way north and eastwards through the night. Some of this rain could be heavy at times, particularly across Scotland, very little in the south, and another warm, muggy night to come. Temperatures minimum around 17 or 18 degrees. So a bit of a cloudier start to Friday. There will be some bright or sunny spells. Rain, though, across northern England and Scotland. This pushing out the way, and then it will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers across the country. Showers most frequent in the Bristol.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 7 o'clock on Thursday the 10th of August. Today, a second data breach in Northern Ireland. Now the Chief Constable's under fire over concerns police officers have been put in danger.
Should ditching the European Convention on Human Rights be at the heart of the Tories' re-election campaign? That's what some members of the Cabinet are demanding of the PM, but could it solve the immigration crisis?
We're asking, is breast best? This is after a lady was told to stop breastfeeding her baby on a flight in case it offended people.
And we'll bring you your latest forecast. It's going to be sunny.
Hello, we'll see temperatures rising through the course of the day today. Find out exactly how high later on in the programme with me.
I'm Isabel Webster.
I'm Stephen Dixon. Good morning. This is Breakfast on GB News.
OK, to our top story this morning, and the Police Federation for Northern Ireland says urgent answers are required after details emerged of a second major data leak containing the names of more than 200 serving officers and staff.
Now, it comes after the worst security breach in Northern Irish history, where the names and locations of the entire police force and civilian staff were put online for 3 hours.
Well, let's find out more from our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Good morning to you, Doogie. And a lot of pressure building there for the head of the police force in Northern Ireland.
There is indeed, Isabel. Most definitely he will feel the pressure today. And, of course, that coming out last night of a further data breach, that was a laptop stolen out of the back of a car in Newtonabbey, which was reportedly to contain the details of 200 officers. Now, they will have already been named in the leak yesterday because that included every officer that was inside the PSNI, and it must be said, civilians that work for the PSNI as well. You can only imagine what is going through some of these officers' heads because this threat here is that severe. Now, the Chief Constable has cut his holidays short. He has arrived back in Northern Ireland last night and he will face politicians here today. Just to explain that to you in a better way, the Policing Service of Northern Ireland is set up after the Good Friday Agreement that took over from the Royal Ulster Constabulary. And basically what you have is at the very top you have the Policing Board. And the Policing Board holds the Chief Constable to account. The Chief Constable then has a management executive in round him of very senior officers. And then on an equal basis almost with that is the Policing Federation, the unions, for want of a better way of explaining this, of the police force of Northern Ireland, and they represent rank and file. Now, the Chief Constable here will arrive at the Policing Board at about 10 o'clock this morning. This is a meeting that has been called specially for the data breach and what has gone on. He will face politicians here today, and those politicians could ask for a head on a plate very quickly, but being politicians, they won't. They will ask for an investigation. That investigation will then look at the Freedom of Information Act that is controlled by civilians inside the Police Service of Northern Ireland. But at some point in that chain, there will be a command structure that is the PSNI, and that is the head that will probably be most exposed at this particular moment. The Chief Con will say that he's launched that investigation. The politicians will more than likely want to hear the outcome of that investigation. But today, unfortunately for that Chief Constable, there is a scheduled Police Federation meeting this afternoon. And many officers in Northern Ireland are not happy about how disciplinary procedures actually go on inside the police force. They say they take too long, there's too many officers left hanging with us, and they will want to see a swift, very swift end to the investigation that will go on here. So you can imagine that we won't see an outcome of this today. We won't know who will resign or who will go, but we would imagine within the next few weeks we will see that, because officers here will want to know that their security is being handled by people that they trust. The language coming out of the Federation last night was one of dismay, anger, almost betrayal by the PSNI themselves to their members. And the Chief Constable has now got to fix that, and his management crew may have to be reshuffled.
OK. Doogie, thanks very much indeed. I mean, the problem with all of this is people can resign all they want. It doesn't change the situation for those people who have been affected by this, does it?
Well, except many of those people may find they end up wanting to resign as well, and maybe even move house to try and protect their family and keep themselves safe, because, you know, we're still living in the shadow of all the troubles in Northern Ireland, and a lot of people really worried this morning.
Yeah, if you're one of those and you want to get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, the Prime Minister is facing calls to put membership of the European Convention on Human Rights at the very heart of his election campaign.
Reportedly, up to a third of the Cabinet believe continued ECHR membership is preventing Britain from protecting its own borders against illegal immigration, with deportations to Rwanda also hanging in the balance.
Let's talk to political analyst Leon Emirali, who's here in the studio. I mean, clearly this has got some momentum, and you can understand why when you look at a lot of the views we're getting this morning. People feel frustrated.
Yeah, and we know that immigration is something that people care deeply about. It's something they're going to base their voting on when it comes to the general election. So the government, I think, are wanting to at least be seen as doing every single thing they can to try and tackle illegal immigration. And what the Conservatives are desperate for is to find a wedge issue, something that they can put themselves in stark contrast with against Labour, and this appears to be one of those issues around the European Convention on Human Rights, and it's no surprise, really, that they are therefore making those noises.
Except it could potentially be a wedge issue within the Conservative Party itself. I mean, when you're talking about the Cabinet having a split on this, that's difficult to sell as an idea then, isn't it?
Very much so. And, you know, there is this split still within the Conservative Party, particularly around issues around Europe, and although we should say that the ECHR nothing to do with the European Union, but it's that sort of sense of an overarching judiciary over the UK sovereignty. And I think when those splits arise, it isn't good for any party heading into a general election. I think the country wants to see a party that is unified, all singing from the same song sheet, and if the Conservatives have these issues amongst themselves and they're fighting behind closed doors, then how are they going to bring that fight to the public when it comes against Labour?
Except you're saying, and rightly so, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it is a voting issue. Now, if the Conservatives are saying, well, we've got these things which we may be able to do, which could change the situation, you stack that up against Labour, for example, who aren't saying a great deal apart from, oh, well, we'd probably keep the barges.
Yeah, well, and that's a strategy, Stephen, that Labour are implementing because they are so far ahead in the polls. What they're trying to do is keep their powder dry and make sure they don't mess anything up as we get closer to the general election. So I don't think it's a real surprise that Labour are keeping quiet, being quite ambiguous on this, because they don't want to say anything that's going to alienate potential voters. But for the Conservatives, who are behind in the polls, they need to win back the right of the country, who are perhaps a little bit alienated by Rishi Sunak, and they also need to win the centre. And if they can't get those two coalitions on board, it's going to be very difficult for them to win the election.
But Leon, you've been inside Downing Street, an advisor right at the heart of government. If you were in there advising, I get the sense you'd probably urge caution on this and say that you don't think it's a good idea to pull out of the ECHR. But what would you say then to somebody in the Cabinet who's saying, well, hang on a minute, this is outdated. It was created to a very different backdrop. The argument that it's only the likes of Belarus and Russia that have pulled out is frankly misleading. That actually that we could do this in a responsible way, in a way that was British and falls back on its own human rights record.
Well, we could. That's certainly an argument, and it's a valid argument, Isabel. But I think when you look at the ECHR, what it underpins, it's effectively there to protect citizens from their governments, protect citizens from the state. And
Don't those exist in this country separately?
They do, and they absolutely do. But then you have to say, well, what if there was a Prime Minister, let's say like Jeremy Corbyn, or someone who's on the extreme of a fringe of a political spectrum? They can change those rules overnight without that overarching judiciary of the ECHR. So it's a safeguard and it's a protection. And I think although it might be popular to tackle this particular issue of the Rwanda flights and illegal immigration, there are so many other aspects the ECHR touches, and I think there could be some unintended consequences.
Yeah, but then you've got to be in a position to say the ECHR, if you're not going to pull out of it, you need to reform it to such a way that it isn't frustrating the political will of a nation.
And that might happen because I think the UK is not the only one that's got issues here with in particular, migration, but also other areas of the ECHR. So there are other countries who may well club together with the UK and say, why don't we reform this thing? Why don't we change this thing from within? And I think that is a far more prudent approach as opposed to simply withdrawing because they don't like this particular law that's stopping them from these Rwanda flights happening.
Just lastly, wasn't the illegal immigration bill supposed to be created to give ministers the powers to stop these so-called pyjama injunctions from Strasbourg that would prevent such things as the deportations to Rwanda. Has that happened or not? I mean, I'm not clear about why that can't be used instead of scrapping the ECHR.
Well, this is another difficulty, because there is a lot of blurred lines between domestic policy and therefore the European Convention on Human Rights policy. So I think what we're looking for, and why a lot of politicians are saying, why don't we just withdraw altogether, so we have that clarity and we can say, well, actually, it's this law, this number, we can then get on with implementing our own policies. But there's a great deal of confusion, I think, amongst not only the public but also politicians about exactly what the ECHR has a responsibility for. And I think this is a story that's going to rumble on and on.
Well, I think John sums it up. He's emailed in saying, outside the London bubble, people are fuming, especially in the coastal towns. I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be a wedge issue, isn't it, at the next election?
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I think it's a sense of frustration is what we're getting through from your emails this morning, that actually not enough is being done on this. And so, you know, what's the next logical step? Or is it just, as one of our guests was saying earlier on, the nuclear option to pull out of the ECHR? Let us know your thoughts this morning. Now, a mum has accused the holiday company TUI of discrimination after she was told not to breastfeed her 6-week-old baby during a flight's takeoff because she might make others feel uncomfortable.
28-year-old mum of 2, Chelsea Williams, says she had to stop breastfeeding so as not to make a scene, but was left feeling anxious as there are no such official restrictions in place.
So we're asking today, is breast best?
Well, joining us in the studio is the UK's foremost social behaviour and etiquette expert, Liz Brewer. Good morning. Always lovely to see you, Liz.
And we also have Jen Cully, a breastfeeding counsellor and birth doula, who's in Leamington Spa, Royal Leamington Spa, this morning.
Morning.
Let's start, Jen, with you on this one, should we? If it's making people feel uncomfortable, which presumably this was, should that not be taken into account?
I think, to be honest, I can't believe we're still having these conversations in 2023. If somebody feels uncomfortable when they see a mother feeding their child, they can simply avert their eyes or look away. It's that simple. And it's so well established that women's rights are protected here in law. So the Equality Act 2010 makes it illegal for businesses or anyone really to discriminate against a woman feeding her baby in public. So it's really simple to me, but I do get really upset every now and then. These stories raise their head again, and you do get people coming out saying, well, shouldn't people just cover up? And actually, no, they shouldn't. It's their right to feed their baby in public.
OK, well, let's get the views then of Liz, who is one of those who thinks that perhaps this mum would have done better to have covered up. Liz, how would you sort of square that with the mum who said that she felt distressed and upset by all of this?
Well, actually, my sympathies are really lying with her. But what I find extraordinary is, what's the difference between breastfeeding a baby on takeoff and during the flight? It's a bit like switching your phones off. To me, it's senseless. And in this day and age, in actual fact, it's against the law, I believe, to tell somebody to stop breastfeeding in public, as long as they're doing it discreetly. And why should it really offend? Quite right. What you said about averting your eyes. You know, there are many ways of breastfeeding without having to sort of, I suppose they're objecting to looking at their breasts, but nowadays you have I think it's called a nursing cloth, and you can do it quite discreetly. But the problem here lies, I think, not so much with the air stewardess, but with her employees, because I gather they've now looking into it and they said, oh, that wasn't their policy. And indeed, the law says that she can't tell somebody, nobody can tell a woman in public to stop breastfeeding unless it's in a dangerous area or it's men only or whatever. So the whole thing about this is actually, it's preposterous. The whole thing is preposterous, and my sympathies lie with that young couple and their little baby.
It's interesting. Jen, I was just going to say, I mean, a lot of people it's a bit of a fine line. I totally appreciate what you say about, it's a right, it's perfectly normal. And I have to say, look, from a personal point of view, I think it's the most natural thing in the world. Therefore, how can you object to it? I don't get it. However, Lara's been in touch and said, I don't have a problem with breastfeeding as long as it's done discreetly. And that's the caveat. But, I mean, you can understand the perspective, but why should it have to be discreet?
Whenever anybody starts a sentence with, I don't have a problem with, but it means that they have a problem with it, doesn't it? So I just, this idea that it should be done discreetly, I actually believe that when most women are breastfeeding, the vast majority of people will have no idea. I can share something. So when my baby was really small, we were at a playgroup, I was holding them, I was breastfeeding them, but I was walking around. And one of my friends actually went to take my baby off me to try and help me. And I said, no, stop, they're actually attached. So that was somebody right in front of me that didn't even realise my baby was attached. So firstly, I think women are generally discreet just because that's the way breastfeeding is. It's not overt. It's like you said, it's really natural and quite quick for most women. And yeah, just this idea that some people find that offensive, I honestly think that that is a reflection of something that's going on for them. And maybe they need to kind of reflect and think, why is this bothering me? And because I should not be projecting my own issues onto this person who is feeding their baby.
Liz, as well, it also comes down to a question of a cost of living crisis. Here we are all struggling to make ends meet. We know how much formula milk costs, and you're making it harder for a mum of a 6-week-old to breastfeed her child, which is completely free. It's discouraging people. It's, it's the absolutely wrong narrative to be putting out at a time like this.
I totally agree. And also, you can express your milk and do it that way, should you, not want to do it in public yourself. But, with breastfeeding, it's something... I mean, I'm going back over 25 years with my daughter, Tallulah, and having to fly to Australia and back, which was, in those days, an over 30-hour flight. There was no way that I could not feed my baby. So I think I'd be very interested to know the figures on the number of people who object to breastfeeding. I'd be fascinated to know that. But going back, I mean, the law is that a woman can breastfeed in public.
I was just going to say, because we've had a few emails in about people who've had objections made in the past, and it would tend to be, Liz, with perhaps some older gentlemen. But is there, in terms of the whole etiquette of it, is this something where we think of etiquette as being set in stone in a way? This is what you do and this is how you do it. This is something which has to change with time.
Absolutely, and you use your common sense and aware are the people who may be sensitive. But again, if they're older gentlemen, as your other person said, you avert your eyes. You don't have to stare. You don't have to look at it. And it is a natural way of feeding a baby. But I still go back to the fact that obviously the stewardess was obviously not aware of the real rules and regulations, and it's up to her employee. I gather they have apologised and are looking into the situation.
Well, they were challenged before the family flew back from holiday on what exactly the company policy was. And TUI said they don't have a formal policy, but they recommend avoiding it during takeoff and landing in case it makes other people feel uncomfortable. But I return, Jen, to the point that never mind about other people feeling uncomfortable. If you have a 6-week-old baby, they need feeding at least every 3 hours. Surely that is the fundamental point here, not whether or not someone else who's totally unrelated to that family or situation feels or doesn't feel.
And also, what's it got to do with taking off and landing?
No, absolutely.
That's what's so ridiculous.
That's actually when you need to be feeding, because it helps them to...
And it helps them, doesn't it, with swallowing. They don't, because otherwise they get earache.
So, as adults, we know we can yawn, we can swallow, we can suck on a boiled sweet to help us equalise. A baby doesn't know that, and babies can get really distressed, and young children. Feeding a baby during takeoff and landing is an incredible way to help them feel comfortable. So, I mean, what was the alternative? And I think this mother shared this, that when she stopped breastfeeding her baby because she was told to, and she then felt, of course, really uncomfortable, the result was that her baby started crying. And what is, the one thing that actually is probably more controversial than feeding a baby on a plane is when babies are crying on a plane.
Yeah.
Yes, that would irritate even more people, wouldn't it? We've got to leave it there. Liz Brewer, Jen Culler, really good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's one of those discussions where common sense prevails. It is the most natural thing on the planet.
Yeah, and that was a little baby, so that baby needed feeding. I think TUI may regret possibly their position in all of this, and let us know if you've been affected similarly in any sort of breastfeeding situations. We'd love to hear from you.
I don't know how you can be offended by it.
It's very strange. I don't understand. It really is just the most natural, wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Right, let's take a look at the forecast, shall we? A bit of a change of tack here. And the good news is the sun has come out to play. Here's Greg Dewhurst.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. So the day ahead is looking fine and dry for many, plenty of sunny spells, feeling much warmer than it has done for many weeks now. And this morning, yes, there is a little bit of low cloud initially, but this should lift and break, and most places having a fine day ahead. Plenty of blue skies. Yes, the cloud will come and go at times across northern England, parts of Scotland, and then will thicken across some western parts later on. Perhaps an afternoon shower developing over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, but most places dry, and those temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s, 28 to 29 Celsius possible towards the southeast this afternoon. We've not seen those temperatures for quite some time. Into the evening, though, we do see a weather front moving into the west, and this will give some rain to Northern Ireland and then parts of Wales, western Scotland, southwest England, slowly pushing its way north and eastwards through the night. Some of this rain could be heavy at times, particularly across Scotland, very little in the south, and another warm, muggy night to come. Temperatures a minimum around 17 or 18 degrees. So a bit of a cloudier start to Friday. There will be some bright or sunny spells. Rain, though, across northern England and Scotland. This pushing out the way, and then it will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers across the country. Showers most frequent in the brisk breeze towards the north and the west, some of these heavy at times. Some places will stay dry, and in the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, temperatures around 25 or 26 Celsius. So still feeling quite warm here, a little fresher towards the northwest.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
OK, stay with us. We've got another debate coming your way now. We're asking whether Brits are at the back of the queue when it comes to receiving help from the state. Stay tuned our way.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Right, still to come on today's programme, the GB News presenter Nigel Farage is joining us to talk us through all the latest with his banking scandal, and he's talking about why cash should be king, or should remain king.
And then businesses putting virtue signalling above profits. There's been a growing backlash against what they're calling woke capitalism, with some people saying it does more harm than good.
And as always, we love to hear from you. Do send in your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
They can't tweet us, Isabel.
Because it's X now.
X.
X us.
You have to X us. You need to
I
get
don't
your head
like
round
saying that. I can't.
Well,
are we actually not going to say tweeting anymore?
Well, you can't. It's not a thing, is it?
Well, it is a thing. It's the action of posting on X.
Well, you need to post to us on X. It's not called a tweet. It even says on the app now it's just a post.
I don't like it anymore.
Or reposting.
Do you like
don't
it?
retweet.
What do you think?
Yeah, I quite like it. It's cool.
Oh, really? OK. Down with the kids.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
Right, shall we move on? And we're talking about, well, the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, this week has been saying that migrants shouldn't be able to pick and choose between four-star hotels and a barge amid a standoff with 20 asylum seekers who are refusing to move on to the Bibby Stockholm vessel earlier this week.
Well, the Conservative MP, and he's also Lord Chancellor, of course, asserted that the £2 billion cost of housing migrants in what they're calling luxury accommodation, some of it's luxury, some of it really isn't, but nevertheless, it could instead be reinvested in schools, hospitals and other public services.
But with so many British people losing housing places to migrants, we're asking, are Brits really being prioritised, or are they at the back of the queue?
Oh, well, let's talk to broadcaster Narinder Kaur, who thinks that only bigots say asylum seekers are treated better than the homeless, and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn, who says that some illegal migrants are being treated better than tax-paying Brits. Good morning to you both. Narinder, not like you to be controversial. It's not bigoted to look at this and say, actually, these people seem to be going to the top of the list when some of our own are struggling.
Well, I think it is bigoted, because when our own are struggling, which they are, that's the government's fault. That's not the refugees' fault. That's not the asylum seekers' fault. Their anger needs to be, it's misdirected. You can't create an asylum seeker problem and then blame them for this government's failings. 13 years, we've got lack of housing, lack of doctors, lack of... our mortgages have gone up, our rents have gone up. That's the government's fault. That is not the asylum seekers' fault. Stop blaming them and creating hate. And that's what this government are trying to do. They're creating hate. They're creating a target so that everybody who's brainwashed or bigoted, they've got their chance now, their green light to go and pick on them. They're the reason for our problems. They're not the reason for our problems. The reason for our problems is this government's lack of help, lack of housing, lack of schools, lack of doctors, everything. The government's fault. It is the government's fault. It's not the fault of the asylum seeker. How can you blame them?
Patrick, do you think Narendra might think you were bigoted or brainwashed in all of this?
Oh, well, I do hope not, but I certainly believe that the duty of a government, of a nation, is primarily to its own citizens, and that the citizens deserve prioritising.
But they do deserve prioritising.
Right, well,
however, both can exist, because the asylum seeker also has legal rights.
Well, look. That's
they have
true.
legal rights, and we have legal obligations.
You make some valid points about there's not an adequate housing stock for this country, but in fact there is more housing in this country than there's ever been, right?
No, there isn't.
Yes, we've got about 2 million more homes than we had at the turn of the century in the last 20 years.
The Tory government have failed to build more housing.
You can say that, but what's happened is the size of our population has roared on ahead of the extra housing capacity.
That's
now,
not
it's not a
correct
matter
either.
of blaming individual people who just want to improve their lives, right? I agree it's the responsibility of the government to set the framework, but what we have here is yesterday a cabinet minister talking a good game from the perspective of people like me about it's not right, it's not fair. But
why is it not right and fair? Why is it not right?
We have more than 50,000 foreign nationals overwhelmingly arrived in our country illegally, who are
there are no safe routes, Patrick. Patrick, you are creating division and hate.
There are schemes
and people,
for Ukraine, Hong Kong,
but not for Afghan,
Syria,
not for all that. No, there are no safe routes. And if there's no safe routes, please don't cause division. Please don't cause racism. I get told to F off back to my own country daily.
If you would let me get a word in edgeways, if you let me get a word in edgeways, what's causing division and what's undermining our race relations are when ordinary, fair-minded members of the British public look and see we have 6,000 homeless veterans, people who risk their lives doing good work across the world, right, and for our country.
And whose fault is that?
Well, look, the housing stock is not big enough to keep bringing in loads more people.
So you're going to blame vulnerable asylum seekers. You're blaming them as opposed to blaming the government.
I'm literally not blaming.
That's not fair.
No, but the issue is here, and it's all about the language. Some are asylum seekers, some are migrants, some are illegal migrants.
Some?
Right.
Right, so we can't...
But we do know there are a lot of illegal migrants who are coming over in small boats. Now, you're right, there is an issue about safe routes, and that needs to be looked at. But in the meantime, these people are illegal, so they and then know they're coming here illegally.
No, but Steve, let's process the claims quicker. Let's process quicker. You can't victimise.
But you can blame people for saying, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be paying smuggling gangs, you shouldn't be doing that.
But if government can deal with that, we can process these claims quicker.
Lorinda,
the government choose not to, Patrick, because they want to create a target to divert away from their failings. How can we divert away from failings? Let's tune into those bigots and blame the asylum seekers.
What we have at the moment is people who've come mainly from a safe country, France, but under an outdated asylum system, but nonetheless that says if you're fleeing in fear of your life, other countries must take you in, right? And these people who allegedly running in fear of their life are complaining about being moved from a 4-star hotel to the sort of accommodation barge refurbished and refitted.
It's a floating prison. It's a floating prison.
Actually, I think it should be secure detention,
Patrick,
but it's
shall
not.
we do this?
They're
Shall we put them in
escorted off,
tents? Shall we put them in tents? Will that make you happy? Will that make people happy? Because this is performative cruelty.
I don't want to see anyone in tents.
The first person who went onto that barge said, oh, it's really nice.
And the second person said, actually, I feel like it's a prison. I'm scared of being on here. So actually 15 people have got on it from 50,000 people. I mean, let's do the math. Yes, let's do the math here. Stop blaming vulnerable people. And yes, there may be some. There may be some who are...
We had people emailing in the other day, say, because this is... what we're talking about is the rights of British people against people from other countries.
Why are we pitting them against each other? Let's not pit. Let's look after both.
We had someone email in the other day who said, my daughter is homeless, she's living with me in a one-bedroom flat with her child. She would love to be on the Bibby Stockholm.
And I feel for her too. I think that both things can exist, both things can coexist, and as a government, they can deal with both. They should be dealing with both.
Yes. How do we solve this problem that Narinda has correctly identified, that people are being pitted against each other? And how do we create a situation whereby we aren't putting Brits at the back of the queue, but equally we are treating people with dignity?
Right, well, what we've got to do is manage our population so it doesn't exceed the capacity of the state to provide public services and accommodation.
The number of children people can have?
I think we need massively to reduce and have a quota for the number of asylum applications we will accept in this country. And I agree with the idea that no one who arrives illegally should be allowed to stay.
Patrick, but then
I personally think the accommodation barge at Dorset should be secure detention. I don't agree with buses into town bringing 500 young men into a seaside resort.
You're creating division.
Right?
You're actually you're talking such colourful language that's incorrect. You're saying keep them inside a floating prison. They're not allowed outside. That's cruel. That's actually being cruel.
People are detained until the merit of their application for asylum.
That can take 3 years. So you want them stuck on a floating prison for up to 3 years?
I'd like it all done much
You're making no
quicker
sense,
with
Patrick.
deportation.
So up to 3 years they can be stuck on this barge. And you know this argument where people say, well, it was good enough for the oil rig workers. They're on it for about 8 weeks. Processing is taking 1 to 3 years.
Processing needs to happen a lot faster.
Correct.
Everyone would agree with that. But it's not about pitting people against each other when, you know, if you have 500 people bust into an area, the local population are unhappy with that, and you can understand why 500 young men are suddenly.
Who said it's just young men?
And also, every single person going on that barge will be a young man.
But actually, that barge, 500 people, it's only the capacity is 222 people, and it's a fire risk. The fire brigade have said this is a disaster waiting to happen.
No,
do you want that?
Those issues have been sorted out, which is why
do you really want people 500, even if it's 500 men, as we keep saying? Okay, but even if it's 500 people, 500 men, do you really want them to be stuck on a barge 24/7 for 3 years? Is that correct?
No, I would like them to be back in their own countries.
And
they arrived in ours
and ask the
illegally.
government to do that by processing it quicker and actually creating safe routes. Because if they did that, problem solved. It's actually quite simple, instead of creating hate. Because I think it's horrible.
Would you then be in support of getting them to Rwanda to be processed? Because I mean.
No, because it's costing too much money. This is costing too much money for the British taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer.
Part of this issue with the barge and trying to use it is trying to get people out of hotels, which is costing a huge amount of money.
So what should we do? Put them in tents? How should we do it? Put them in tents?
You say to put them in tents with that sort of derogatory tone, but there are thousands of British people every night, not even with a tent
and
on the
whose
streets.
fault is that?
Because our housing capacity is under such strain, we're a crowded country.
Patrick,
getting houses built is very difficult.
Housing is under such capacity because the government didn't build enough. This is the failings of the Tory government. It's appalling what they've done.
Labour
I know
would
what they've done is create hate. And I feel sad about that because as a woman of colour in this country, I get told to F off back to my country daily. And Lee Anderson has just given a green light to all of that. And actually, vulnerable people coming in, yes, there probably is some people who are illegal and they're doing it just to play the good. Some. But let's not pick on the people who are actually genuine. Because I think we're better than that as a country.
Well,
you know, the British people, I truly believe,
it's the scale
are
of this
better.
influx that's undermining what were very good race relations in this country.
But we're not going to be able to change the scale of the influx, are we? I mean, it's a global problem.
Well,
we're seeing most European countries
I think we could.
higher numbers than we are in the United States.
But I think you've had discussions on your programme already about essential steps, as in withdrawing from the European Convention and the UN Refugee Convention 1951. Ages and ages ago, different world.
Patrick,
we need a governing party that's prepared to do that.
Patrick, we've had 1 million legal migrants. 1 million legal.
In a single year.
So what's happened to your capacity of schools, hospitals? Exactly. Why do we pick on the asylum seekers and not the legal million?
Two wrongs don't make a right. That legal immigration volumes is an even bigger problem. Pressure pressure on public services.
That we have shortages of people doing jobs, and we need migrants to come in and do that. And this is what the Chancellor of the Exchequer said.
Why not let them
We
work?
need people to come in and work.
Let them work. They're desperate to work.
That will just draw millions more people in. If you allow asylum seekers to work and earn money, it's a massive extra pull factor. We cannot.
And our economy needs that, Patrick.
It doesn't.
Our economy needs
inactive Brits.
Our economy
to
has
get into
always
the labour
survived on actually migrants. Our economy has thrived on immigration for years, hundreds of years.
On that basis, you just open the border, wouldn't you?
No, but look, no one's saying we just open the borders.
Yes,
Nobody's
they are.
actually saying that. But we certainly need the workers because British people do not want to clean the toilets. They don't want to pick the food.
Yeah.
They won't do it.
Just look at the banners, no borders. You know, everyone welcome.
No, we don't do that, Patrick. Again, you're exaggerating, and again, you're creating some kind of division.
The left
because
in this
no one's saying open
these
borders.
days doesn't believe in borders. It believes
that's incorrect. We do believe in borders. We have to have borders. That just makes sense. That's common sense. We need borders, but we don't need people creating division and hate.
You don't want borders being enforced.
Right. Well, we've got to leave it there.
We're not going to agree.
Because I'm exhausted. Dorinda, thank you very much.
Need to lie down after that.
I'm sure you've got a view on that. Let us know what you think.
Yes, and we'll be getting the views of the presenter, Nigel Farage, who'll be joining us a little bit later on to talk through. I'm sure he'll give us a view on this, but also, actually, at the moment, his big issue is the issue of being debanked. We'll get an update from him on that. Stay tuned, no way for it.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big read by superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Recovered from that. We need to lie down, don't
No,
we?
I'm not. I'm still in shell shock, to be perfectly honest. It is 7:44. Let's go through the papers. Political consultant Emma Burnell, the deputy editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Let's kick off with the Crooked Pub fire in the Mirror.
Yes, it's probably worth saying that the Crooked Pub fire is called this because the pub was crooked.
Yes.
Although it does appear that the fire may be too. It burnt down 9 days after being purchased, and the purchasing owner was right next to some land also owned by the same people. One doesn't wish to speculate, but it is currently being treated by the police as a potential arson. And I think there is a real worry. Like, this is a landmark pub. It was, a really kind of, historic building, a huge amount of character, and it's just such a shame when these things are lost anyway. It'd be more of a shame if that's being done for devious reasons.
Well, arson is an awful thing. You never know who's behind all of that, but no doubt the police will be investigating, so we'll find out.
I feel sorry for any pub landlord whose pub actually does burn down.
Yeah, everyone will always be suspicious for all eternity. It's like when the Weston-super-Mare Pier burnt down and everyone was looking at the owners thinking, oh, yeah. And it got a whole new remodel, but it's always suspicious, isn't it, if your business burns down? Freddie, what about...
bunch.
I work from home, so I would like to say that if my business burns down, I'm in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Oh, let's not talk about that. Harry has lost his HRH title very discreetly on the royal website.
Discreetly removed from the royal website now. This actually happened a couple of years ago that they were no longer allowed to use the HRH title, but now the website has finally been updated, and I think it's just probably a kind of bureaucratic thing that didn't get round to updating it. But it does signify that they have lost their status, and they have been downgraded on the sort of list of royals in that section on the website, and only Prince Andrew is below them. And that sort of tells you perhaps what the royal family really think about Harry.
Is he still HRH?
Yes, I think he is.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure. You've got me there. I think he still is.
Does it really matter if he is no longer HR? He's still a prince. He's still a duke. He's just not His Royal Highness. I mean...
Ask Emma if any of this stuff matters. I think she'll tell you...
I know you're distraught about it.
I could not be... Admin has happened. Great. Maybe it's a summer... I mean, only the royals would it be, like, actually in a newspaper that an administrative decision that was made 3 years ago has finally been caught up on the website.
But there's two other royal stories in the paper today. One is that Harry was in Japan and he told families that he'd be happy to live there. And the other is that Prince William is, among Americans, is the most popular foreign public figure.
Right. Not just foreign. He's because the other people on that list include Joe Biden and Donald Trump are near the bottom.
Yeah.
But it's any considered political or diplomatic leader. So he's the most... I think it's one of those things where he's got a very well-curated public image, particularly in the States.
Well, quite right, too.
Prince William for president.
Well, he's 1% behind Zelensky.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 58%. Still not that high, is it?
No, but it's saying, fair enough, I think. Good on him. Now...
I've gone for Zelensky.
Most politicians would be happy with 58%.
Yeah, I only thought the Pope would be up there, but it didn't seem to be.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the Times, should we, Emma? And the pension bill, which falls under state benefits.
It does.
I know people hate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is a state benefit. That's exactly what it is. And I think it's always worth pointing that out when we start kind of demonising anyone on benefits. We essentially mean anyone over the age of 65. The state pension bill is big and getting bigger. It's now going to outstrip the cost of running 3 departments, which include defence and education, really quite big and important departments. The problem, of course, is twofold. First of all, the government committed to the triple lock, which means that the pension rises all the time. And there are no ways to bring that down because it either rises with the cost of inflation, now that's obviously been very high, or if the inflation rate is low, then it goes up by a certain percentage. We're also living longer. So the amount of people claiming their pension from 65, you know, it used to be that might be a 15 to 20 years. It's now 30, sometimes even 40 years.
But this is why, of course, the pension age is going up.
This is why the pension age is going up. But also, what we have a real demographic squeeze because we are having fewer children. I think you were talking about this on an item earlier. You know, there are fewer people paying, because what pays for pension is not the money that you paid in your working lifetime, but the money that working people are paying now. And as that pot gets smaller and smaller, because we are giving jobs away to AI, because we're giving jobs away to robots, because we just...
you can't blame robots for this.
I blame robots for everything. But yeah, we just have fewer people paying into the paying national insurance, which is what pays for current pensioners. So there's a real squeeze happening.
It's why the government's urging over 50s to
get on their bike.
Deliveroo jobs and stuff.
Yeah, who was it who said that? I can't remember which MP it was now. Someone fairly
It was
important.
a cabinet minister, I think.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? So, yeah, get on your bike, literally.
Robert Buckland, I think it was.
Yeah.
Was it Buckland? Oh, there you go.
Should we talk about top choice for parents, Freddie, in the Mail? Which book is #1 for bedtime reading?
It is The Gruffalo. Which you've never read it?
No.
Me neither.
I don't mind it. I like Julia Donaldson was very popular with my children, and she's, sells millions. 13 million since it was published in 1999. I think they are very, very good. They're well constructed. Stories. There's The Snail and the Whale. You know, that one, The Highway Rat. That was particularly.
What about a dragon as well? They are really sort of up there with Harry Potter. And
what about The Very Hungry Caterpillar?
That's second.
Number 2.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Number 2.
Now, that must have done more than 13 million sales since it was published. It's been around since I was born in 74 and it was all around there.
Yeah, no, I remember it from
Probably
my
has it.
childhood.
Shall I try some other ones on you?
Oh, go on.
That's Not My... Fiona Watt. I think that's Not My Cat.
Oh, right.
That's not mine.
No, not familiar with that one.
It's an early one. It's for the sort of the 1 to 3 range. Guess How Much I Love You by Sam McBratney. I've never heard of
that.
This
the one
with the
to the moon
bunny
and back?
to the moon and back. Yeah, I know that one.
Peppa Pig.
Oh, Lord.
Boris Johnson's favourite.
Spot by Eric Hill.
Spot, the dog.
Yeah. The Tale of Peter Rabbit, still number 7. That's good to see. Dear Zoo by Rod Campbell, which I've never heard of.
No.
And Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, I love Winnie the Pooh.
And then number 10 is Harry Potter.
Oh, right.
But this is
But it just
stories
says
that parents
Harry
are reading
Potter,
to their children.
rather than, like, it's not one of the Harry Potters, it's all of the Harry Potters, or...?
It just says Harry Potter.
Fair enough.
But I imagine this is parents telling a survey what they like.
I'm very glad that Beatrix Potter's in there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they're just so beautiful, actually.
I was really frightened of one of the Beatrix Potters. I think it was Tom Kitten, the one where he gets stuck up a chimney.
Oh.
Terrified me as a child, but it's beautifully written. It's wonderful stories.
Yeah.
But we were saying earlier, there should be a bit of darkness in children's stories.
Yeah, there should be.
Yeah,
It was like
absolutely.
Jemima Puddle Duck, the bloomin' fox trying to eat all her eggs, and she's just desperate to have her little duck egg somewhere safe.
No, kids love a little sort of slightly spooky or slightly scary story. It's a safe way to learn to deal with fear in some ways.
Yeah, yeah. Let's have a look at The Guardian, should we? Getting locked in a shop, Emma, which I think is Isabel's dream.
Oh, yes, please.
Is it JD Sports in particular?
No, not really.
Yeah, see,
I was thinking getting locked in an IKEA would be all right.
You could have a kid.
you could just, sleep.
You could do everything.
Eat meatballs.
So I bought my favourite shop to be locked
bedrooms,
into.
kitchens, living
Been all
rooms.
right in Harvey Nicks, maybe.
Yeah.
One of the big department stores.
Yes.
It's the difference between me and her. IKEA and Harvey Nicks.
That you're covering all bases. But this is a very bizarre story because what happened was there was a kind of call out on social media, TikTok, I think in particular, like meet up at 3 p.m. We're all going on the Rob. And loads of people turned up, very few of them to actually go on the Rob, more of them to just see what was going to happen. And there's an absolutely brilliant quote. Let me see if I can remember it. With a young boy, 14-year-old called Harry, he said, I'm not here to rob. I was brought up better than that. And And then he points at his phone, I'm just here to film it. And I just say, if you could bottle the essence of a current 14-year-old, it would be that quote.
Yeah. See, that's just making me think of one of my favourite childhood books, which was The Cops and the Robbers by Janet Allen Alberg.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, ho-ho for the cops.
Ho-ho for the cops and robbers, ho-ho.
Sorry. Anyway, you were going to say.
Well, no, I was just going to say, we sent a colleague, we sort of, this story sort of was flaring up on social media, TikTok in particular, that there's going to be this great robbery on Oxford Street, and we sent a colleague to go and, because he was following it, and he just went along and said it was all just people to see if the robbery was going to happen. That was it. But perhaps it might be a great diversionary tactic if you do want to rob somewhere. Set up a social media storm about a robbery somewhere else.
Top tip.
You could be right. On that devious note, Freddie, we'll leave it there. And Emma, thanks very much indeed. See you in the next hour. Let's get a check on the weather with Greg.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. So the day ahead is looking fine and dry for many, plenty of sunny spells, feeling much warmer than it has done for many weeks now. And this morning, yes, there is a little bit of low cloud initially, but this should lift and break, and most places having a fine day ahead. Plenty of blue skies. Yes, the cloud will come and go at times across northern England, parts of Scotland, and then will thicken across some western parts later on. Perhaps an afternoon shower developing over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, but most places dry, and those temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s. 28 to 29 Celsius possible towards the southeast this afternoon. We've not seen those temperatures for quite some time. Into the evening, though, we do see a weather front moving into the west, and this will give some rain to Northern Ireland and then parts of Wales, western Scotland, southwest England, slowly pushing its way north and eastwards through the night. Some of this rain could be heavy at times, particularly across Scotland, very little in the south, and another warm, muggy night to come. Temperatures minimum around 17 or 18 degrees. So a bit of a cloudier start to Friday. There will be some bright or sunny spells. Rain, though, across northern England and Scotland. This pushing out the way, and then it will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers across the country. Showers most frequent in the brisk breeze towards the north and the west, some of these heavy at times. Some places will stay dry, and in the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, temperatures around 25 or 26 Celsius. So still feeling quite warm here, a little fresher towards the northwest.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Stay with us. Coming up, Nigel Farage will be joining us to talk us through all the latest with his banking scandal. You won't want to miss it.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 10th of August. Today, a war on money. Two of the UK's biggest banks have been given 2 weeks to explain why they've been shutting people's accounts. Meanwhile, our very own Nigel Farage will talk us through all of that and explain why cash is so important, even in this day and age.
Are businesses putting virtue signalling above profits? There's been growing backlash against so-called woke capitalism, with experts suggesting it does more harm than good.
Former Lioness Sanderson will be joining us to talk through England's prospects in the World Cup. They'll be taking on Colombia on Saturday in the quarter-finals.
And as always, we'll be bringing you your latest forecast.
Hello, we'll see temperatures rising through the course of the day today. Find out exactly how high later on in the programme with me.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Isabel Webster, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Now, there is a real risk that we could become a cashless society, despite more than 5 million adults still relying on cash in the UK.
But support is growing for the GB News Don't Kill Cash campaign, which now stands at over 260,000 signatures as pressure is mounting on the government to introduce legislation to protect physical cash.
Well, one industry that really relies on cash is the arcade industry, no surprise, with coin payments being the mainstay of the business.
And our reporter Anna Riley has been looking into this, but a warning though, this contains some flash photography.
With 2p coin pushers, along with crane grabbers and more, seaside arcades hold a special place in British culture. To play on the amusements, coins and notes are traditionally the only form of payment. And this is the way Leisureland in Bridlington wants it to stay.
If we went cashless, we'd have to... I mean, us as a family business, we would inevitably close, unfortunately. Sad to say. But we just wouldn't be able to deal with it. Big companies may be able to bring in that infrastructure of going cashless. I know a lot have already. But arcades just wouldn't be the same. It's all about coins. It's all about hearing the noise. You can hear the noise around you. It's all about good family fun, and that's what we're all about. And we need cash to do that.
Cash is king not just for the arcades, but for other small businesses along the coast.
With cash, it's dependable. It has been dependable for many, many years. It's a private, as I say, way of spending. And yeah, businesses like us and a lot of other businesses, retail, you only have to look at the high street. Half the high street's closed. Card processing fees are killing a lot of small businesses. With cash, we get to keep it all, which means we get to stay open, which means we get to keep entertaining people.
And customers here won't be trading coins for cards anytime soon.
The thrill is putting the 2p's in, or the 10p's or whatever, to try and win. That's the thrill of an arcade, not swiping a card and then you've got whatever to do. I enjoy putting the 2p's in and whatever else.
It wouldn't be an enjoyment, would there? You know what I mean? It's like be done with. The fun is putting it in and trying to make them fall down.
It's easier to put them inside the machine instead of swiping your card and it taking it out of your account.
You see like digits on the screen, you don't really feel like it's real, but if you see like an actual pound coin in your hand, you know the value of it.
Back to represent Britain's amusements and high street gaming manufacturers and operators and support the continued use of cash in the industry.
If you took cash away and you got rid of all those machines that take cash, you would get rid of those businesses, and they're woven into the kind of economic and social fabric of our coastal resorts, aren't they? I mean, it's one thing that I think is quite unique to this country, and something we know from research enjoyed by a third of the population every year, and over their lifetime, 2/3 of the population.
So, without cash here at the seaside, it would be game over for arcade owners. Anna Riley, GB News, Bridlington.
It's a fair point, isn't it? I like an arcade.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
My kids like an arcade. It's good on holiday, isn't it?
Really good fun. Now, one man who knows about the dangers of a cashless society better than most is Nigel Farage. And, of course, he's launched a national campaign to stand up for victims of debanking after his own issues with NatWest.
And he joins us this morning. Good morning to you, Nigel. Update us on where you are with your own crusade.
Well, I'm heading off to Clacton, actually, because that's the closest seaside arcade, I think. I love that report. I love seaside arcades, and it's one element. But you see, part of my campaign is because not only have 5,000 bank branches closed around the country since 2015, but increasingly, the banks do not want to accept cash from small businesses, and it's one of the reasons they're closing so many people down. So as far as my campaign's concerned, well, on a personal level, I'm getting ever angrier with NatWest and Coutts. I put in a subject access request to NatWest, the parent of Coutts, to try and get personal information. They've now come back and said the situation is complex, and therefore they won't answer me until nearly the end of October. I wrote to the Information Commissioner's Office to report a breach because Dame Alison Rose clearly broke GDPR rules by discussing details of my bank account with the BBC. They've told me my situation is complex and it might take a long time to sort out. So they're trying to kick the whole thing into the long grass. So my situation is still very much stalemated. However, on the bigger picture, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, clearly realising that with the possibility of up to 1 million people being debanked over the course of the last 4 years, that there is a national scandal here. He wrote a letter to the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulator of the industry, saying he wanted urgent action. And for once, they've actually done something. They've written to the 25 leading banks and building societies, demanding to know by the 25th of August how many accounts have been closed recently and what the reasons are. So we do at least now have a national debate going on. We've finally got the regulator to wake up to what's going on within the banking industry. And let's hope now that the door is open to some very real changes and reforms.
I'll tell you what really worries me about this, Nigel, is the idea that, you know, potentially 250,000 accounts have been closed every year for the last 4 years with no reason having to be given, and actually people being left without a voice. Now, you've got a profile, you've got a voice, you've raised the issue. If that hadn't have happened, we would have just carried on regardless, wouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the point, Stephen, is this. Why does it take me to blow the whistle on this? What were the FCA doing? What was the regulator doing? Well, I'll tell you. Have a brief peek at their website, boasting about how many of them were going on pride marches, talking about the importance of LGBTQI community within financial services. I mean, they've all become politicised. They've all gone down this route, you know, of woke corporatism and capitalism. And actually, what a bank needs to do, and yes, they're private businesses, but remember, our taxes went up to bail them out in 2008 and 2009. And you can't actually live in the modern world without a bank account. It's literally impossible. Even if GBNews succeeds in keeping cash in the economy, you still need a basic bank account to pay the gas bill. So my real annoyance is that the regulator has been asleep at the wheel, too busy fighting political campaigns, and really, this should have been investigated a couple of years ago.
And look, you, as we've discussed, you very much highlighting the issue of what it would be like if you were debanked. Just tell our viewers and listeners what it would be like and what cash means to you if we were in a cashless society, and basically why you're putting your weight behind the Don't Kill Cash campaign.
A couple of points, really. Firstly, if we have a fully digitised financial system, not only would it leave us very vulnerable to cyber attack, and I mean, have a look at the fact that 40 million people's details have been hacked from the Electoral Commission website. We've learned that this week. So we leave ourselves highly vulnerable to our enemies. But above all, my big worry is this. It would open the door for the Big Brother state. Do you know already NatWest Bank are telling their customers not to buy cryptocurrencies, even though if they buy them through a firm like Coinbase, which is a registered company, and it should be a legal activity, banks already... You go into the bank today, guys, try and withdraw more than £1,000 in cash. They'll ask you what it's for. Well, it's your blooming money. And my worry is this. We would finish up, for example, with personal carbon credits. No. You can't book that flight to Marbella. You've used up your allowance for the year. This would be the ultimate potential form of Big Brother control of our lives. And that, I think, above all, is why it must be fought.
You see, that's interesting, because I'm someone, Nigel, who... I've got to be honest, I very rarely use cash, unless I'm up in Blackpool going to the arcades. And there is progress in society, isn't there, where we are becoming more cashless, we are buying more things online, we're chip and pinning and all the rest of it like mad. But I suppose what we don't think about is that Big Brother implication, the idea that actually this can be used in a way that most of us don't even perceive.
Look, it happened in Canada. Remember the Canadian truckers? People who'd gone about their business legally for years. Suddenly, a vaccine mandate came in. Many of them didn't agree with it. They protested peacefully in Ottawa. And what did Justin Trudeau, the PM, do? He froze their bank accounts. You see, this can be misused in very, very frightening ways. There's also a practical point here. If you're a small trader, and I was talking last week to a lady who runs a fish counter. Down on the beach in Kent, brothers go and catch fish. She sells it at the roadside. Well, first point is the internet often doesn't blooming work. So even if you've got a credit card machine, you may not be able to take the payment. And that's true for Cumbria and all sorts of parts of the country. And secondly, if your average transaction is £7 or £8 and you're going through card machines, you're looking at 1 3/4, 2% commission on that money. That's a big chunk of your profit margin. And I'll bet you every penny in Lombard Street to an orange that if we went cashless, the fees for those cards for small businesses would go even higher. So there are many, many arguments as to why cash still... And Stephen, you're in London. You go around London and everything is tapped with a card. But you get outside London into our rural communities, our coastal communities, that is not the reality. So there are practical reasons why cash needs to stay. There are, I think, personal security, Big Brother implication reasons why cash should stay. And what I want to see, and this is not difficult, I want the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I want his next move to say that legal tender will remain legal tender. Simple as that.
Yeah.
All right, well, on that note, we'll leave that. Thank you very much, Nigel. Have a fabulous day. I know you're off, as you say, to Clacton. We wish you well on your travels. Meanwhile, here in the United...
On the slot machines as
on
well,
the slot
Nigel.
machines.
Good luck on the slot machines. Sure, he'll chuck a few quid in there. If you want to support the campaign, by the way, gbnews.com/cash.
Yeah.
And I think, there you go, you can scan that QR code
260,000 of you already have, so keep those signatures coming in.
It's about choice, isn't it? As I say, I'm not a big cash user.
I'm not either, but I wouldn't miss it if it was gone.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's one of those, you want the choice.
And there is something very nice about holding a wodge of cash.
Oh, I'm sure, I wouldn't know.
Isn't there? In the birthday cards.
Oh, yes.
And all that. Isn't it lovely when a fiver drops out the birthday card?
Not a very big wad of cash, is it?
Well, if you get a couple of fivers, 10...
Not too shabby.
15, 20 quid, it's lovely.
Yeah, last time I got cash in the post, those days are gone.
Oh, it's nice.
Right, we're going to turn our attention over the pond. A big developing story overnight. A man who was posting violent threats against President Biden online was killed by the FBI in a raid in Utah.
OK, let's talk to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who's been monitoring all of this. What's going on, Mark?
This is a man called Craig Robertson who had posted a number of threats, thinly veiled and actually explicit threats against the US president, against the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, a man that's leading the investigation into Donald Trump over alleged hush money that was paid to the porn star Stormy Daniels. And also threats against, allegedly, the US Attorney General Merrick Garland and the New York Attorney General. He first came to light and to the attention of the FBI in March this year when he posted a threat against Alvin Bragg, the district attorney. He was visited by the FBI, told them on that occasion, look, this is just a dream, nothing in it, but continued to post. As late as yesterday, he posted saying when he visits, this is President Biden who is visiting Utah, where this man was based in a town called Provo, which is about 40 miles from Salt Lake City. He said perhaps Utah will become famous this week as the place a sniper took out Biden, the Marxist. So clearly there is a threat assessment centre that the FBI has, that the US Secret Service has. They get many, many threats into them on a daily basis, and they have to assess those that they feel could be potentially legitimate and pose a significant threat to high-profile figures like the US president. Clearly, they visited this individual. We're told that whatever they found when they went through the door meant that they felt a real fear for their lives, so they opened fire on this man and shot him dead.
Mm-hmm. Heck, I mean, you would work on the basis, wouldn't you, that they wouldn't shoot without good reason? I mean, that's because you always say you're talking FBI and Secret Service involved in all of this.
But also mistakes happen, you know.
Well, this is true. So it's will we get a full investigation into this?
Well, I mean, we certainly know from the initial court documents that have come out about this incident that this man had been posting. He'd been posting pictures of a sniper rifle that he had as well, camouflage get-up that he was in, saying that he was going to dust off his ghillie suit, his kind of hunting suit, with a view to the visit by President Biden. As I say, it's a really difficult one because there are hundreds and hundreds of these kind of threats that come across the desks of the FBI and the Secret Service daily that they have to look at. The vast majority are just nonsense, people sounding off that would never do anything about it. But they need to weigh up the potential risk. Now, we don't know if the man had a gun in his possession when they went through the door, but that will come out in the fullness of time.
And meanwhile, that presidential trip to Utah will continue as planned, irrespective of what's happened overnight.
Yeah, I mean, these events are planned well in advance. It's huge security service detail. It would have to be a very explicit and ongoing threat to halt that. And because this individual, a lone individual, we believe, is now out of the picture, there is not perceived to be any wider threat. So that visit, the first visit by Joe Biden to the state of Utah, is going ahead today. He's going to visit veterans and other locations in and around Salt Lake City.
OK, Mark, thanks very much indeed. We were talking about illegal migrants earlier on. Do they get preferential treatment in terms of housing and all that sort of business? And debated that rather voraciously a little bit earlier on. Narinder Kaur, who was here, saying, you know, that really this isn't an issue. It's all about people are being baited into discussing all of this. And it's all just down to processing. People should just be processed faster. Colin says, how do you process people faster when they throw away their documents? Which is a valid point. You know, we do know that people are discarding documents and then arriving here with no documentation. You can't prove who they are, where they're from.
Well, legitimately fleeing without their documents because they're running from war or whatever it might be.
Well, that's true.
Genocide. You don't necessarily always have your passport handy, but that does create a challenge, as you say, Colin, when it comes to processing. Lots of you were commenting on our female guest, actually, Peter in Leeds, saying Narinder missed the point. It's not about blame, it's about prioritising.
Helen says it would be interesting to know how many migrants are in social housing when our families struggle to find housing. And it is a difficult one. You know, I think both people made some interesting points in that one, but it is difficult when we have people on the streets here, people who can't get social housing, veterans on the streets, who don't seem to get any attention when we're forking out £2.2 billion housing people who may or may not have the right to be here. It's a valid issue. It's got to be looked, and there's nothing wrong with looking at that issue. No. But your thoughts, keep them coming through on that one. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Something to cheer everybody up. The sun's putting in an appearance. It might be brief, it might not be here to stay, but here's Greg Dewhurst with all your forecast details.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. So the day ahead is looking fine and dry for many, plenty of sunny spells, feeling much warmer than it has done for many weeks now. And this morning, yes, there is a little bit of low cloud initially, but this should lift and break, and most places having a fine day ahead. Plenty of blue skies. Yes, the cloud will come and go at times across northern England, parts of Scotland, and then will thicken across some western parts later on. Perhaps an afternoon shower developing over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, but most places dry, and those temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s, 28 to 29 Celsius possible towards the southeast this afternoon. We've not seen those temperatures for quite some time. Into the evening, though, we do see a weather front moving into the west, and this will give some rain to Northern Ireland and then parts of Wales, western Scotland, southwest England, slowly pushing its way north and eastwards through the night. Some of this rain could be heavy at times, particularly across Scotland, very little in the south, and another warm, muggy night to come. Temperatures at the minimum around 17 or 18 degrees. So a bit of a cloudier start to Friday. There will be some bright or sunny spells. Rain, though, across northern England and Scotland. This pushing out the way, and then it will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers across the country. Showers most frequent in the brisk breeze towards the north and the west, some of these heavy at times. Some places will stay dry, and in the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, temperatures around 25 or 26 Celsius. So still feeling quite warm here, a little fresher towards the northwest.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, coming up, we're asking, are businesses putting virtue signalling ahead of profits? This is after a
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Still to come on today's programme, the former Lioness Leanne Sanderson will be joining us to talk through England's prospects in the Football World Cup. Will obviously be taking on Colombia on Saturday, so she'll give us her thoughts ahead of the big game.
And then, do you fancy yourself as a monster hunter? Bet you do. The Loch Ness Centre calling on volunteers to join the search for the beast. If you find it, that's the way.
Yeah, then you
She's
can
there
share
somewhere.
It.
She is there somewhere. If you've ever seen the Loch Ness Monster, let us know.
Right. Right, we are talking about the efforts of businesses to meet environmental, social and governance targets, known as ESG. They've been getting growing criticism over the recent years, and many are accused of being too morally conscious.
Yeah, sometimes it's called woke capitalism. The need to meet these ESG targets has seen the likes of Costa Coffee putting trans men with mastectomies on their adverts, and Ben & Jerry telling Suella Braverman to scrap the Rwanda plan.
But is it time organisations stopped virtue signalling, or are we simply in the enlightened age where businesses have a duty to help the world?
Let's talk to property expert Russell Quirk, who thinks that businesses trying to meet those targets are guilty of woke washing.
Meanwhile, the founder of the vegan skincare brand Frank's Remedies, Kyle Frank, thinks that although some organisations put virtue signalling above profits, a lot of smaller businesses, including his own, do it authentically as part of their brand DNA. Well, let's get the thoughts then of Kyle first of all. So you would say this is a genuine concern, and it isn't woke?
Well, for me, and what I'm familiar about with smaller businesses, it's actually part of the brand DNA. So for me, myself, having terrible acne and being able to create products that was able to help alongside the physical effects, I felt there was a great need to help with the emotional effects, and that's something that I kind of went through. And having a background in child psychology, I thought it was a great thing to do, especially spending a lot of time working in local areas with schools and teachers. I found it as very much a need, and it wasn't something that the government or policies were going to do itself. So as a business myself and being able to express and create my brand in this way, it's been really helpful for my community and growing that too.
What's wrong with companies, whether big or small, Russell, having a bit of social responsibility?
I think that there's a difference between having a social responsibility in terms of their DNA, their credentials, where they purchase from and so on, which is what the ESG thing is all about, versus huge multinational corporations with multi-billion-dollar marketing budgets, so people like Costa, Anheuser-Busch and Miller Lite, and of course, various others. Wix, of course, is another example. Ben & Jerry's, great example. They have an unfair advantage in terms of the enormity of their budget, so that they can proclaim, they can preach to us as the public in terms of how we should go about our daily lives. Now, if I want to be preached to, Stephen, I'll go to Speaker's Corner or I'll go to church. I don't expect the place that I buy my coffee from to tell me what I should think in terms of the trans movement.
But there's a difference, isn't there? And I think isn't it an important difference? Ben & Jerry's having a view on a political issue...
It's not a view, it's a proclamation.
Well, OK, a proclamation on a political issue, you can say they shouldn't be getting involved in politics. Costa Coffee having a view on a trans issue, well, that's different. That's not actually political, that's human rights.
No, but it's not a view, it's the preaching, it's the ramming it down our throats in terms of not just what we should think, but famously the CEO of Wix said that essentially people that didn't prescribe to his view on trans issues, for instance, were not welcome in his store. Now, what right... No, but I know they're a private business, but what right has a private business with that huge influence, that huge marketing budget, to tell someone that they're not welcome to go and buy a drill in that store just because their political views? It's exactly the same as the debate we're having with Nigel Farage and banks.
Is it?
Yes, of course it is. Because
there's a choice. But would you be getting your knickers in a twist if they were saying, well, if you don't like gay people, you shouldn't come in the store? Presumably you'd then go, oh well, no, because it's wrong to be homophobic.
Because when it comes to homophobia and racism, there are laws against that, absolutely rightly so. But this is just people's ordinary political views. I mean, for instance, people now that voted Brexit are often seen as being extreme right-wing, far-right extremists, just because those on the left, those that wish to woke-wash, want to label those people as such. That then becomes kind of normal. But the other thing that I get concerned about is whether these companies, whether it be Anheuser-Busch, whether it be Costa and so on, whether they really believe what they're saying or whether this is actually just some attempt at PR skullduggery. Like Benetton. Do you remember Benetton in the 80s and 90s, where they had these very controversial adverts, babies that had just been born, priests kissing nuns and so on? A clever marketeer or PR person would say, look, let's be ultra-controversial. We'll get a bit of flack for a few weeks, but then ultimately people will remember our brand. So I think there's a lot of disingenuousness about this.
Carl, isn't there a danger this could backfire as a business model, that actually people like Russell will say, hang on a minute, I don't want a shot of politics with my coffee, I just want my coffee?
Yeah, I agree, and I think it goes back down to the brand DNA. I think it's, for example, on the topic of coffee, I mean, where does that brand itself have the jurisdiction to comment on those kind of concerns? I think it's very admirable that they kind of want to support in that way, but maybe there's a better way of doing it, perhaps. I think it'll be very interesting to explore their marketing behind it and what research they've done before deploying this marketing plan.
Because I think of Carlsberg in the States, didn't they see a decline in sales after they went for a trans advert, and it actually was a huge turn-off?
Yeah, Anheuser-Busch, they lost $3 billion off their share price as a consequence of taking a position. And I don't think that beer companies that sell beer should divide their audience. I mean, from a P&L point of view, it's ludicrous to divide your audience, your customer base, so that some decide to boycott you as Miller Lite or as Costa or as Wix or as Ben & Jerry's.
And I think, so I was going to say, I think they're trying to be inclusive, but in a way of being inclusive, in a way maybe not doing it kind of like correctly, they're actually alienating a lot of their customers. And I think I was reading somewhere where they said they called 10% of the customers that were going to stop shopping with them hot air. And I think even for me, especially as a small business owner, I wouldn't even I wouldn't even put one customer and call them like hot air like that. So I think there's definitely a language that needs to be kind of like changed and adopted to that, and more of an inclusivity to be inclusive in that way.
But isn't there for those people who, and I get what you're saying about some of its PR campaigns, right? And some of it clearly is. When all the logos change into rainbow colours, you just think, well, do they believe this or not? I'm not absolutely convinced. However, for those people who are sort of putting their money where their mouth is, quite literally, in some of these cases, as private businesses who need to attract customers in, if they feel there is a moral duty, a moral need to say, we need to accept this particular group of people, whoever it is, then it's their right to do so.
But isn't that implied? I mean, did anybody think that Costa were anti-trans or that Wicks were homophobic? No one needs to spend that disproportionate amount of budget and that influence to tell people the obvious.
I totally get your point. Except we are in a world now where there does seem to be a huge anti-trans movement from people who don't really understand the issue.
Yeah, but not from corporates. I mean,
no, not from corporates, but from their customers.
So why do they need to say it?
From their customers.
Why do they need to say it?
So can't they influence a customer?
No, but what they're doing is effectively alienating some that say, I don't want to hear this from the person that sells me coffee or a drill. It's a bridge too far. I mean, commercial entities, not only do they not have that moral obligation or imperative to preach, but it's commercial suicide. I mean, using the example of Anheuser-Busch, $3 billion off their share price as a consequence of taking a position. I mean, how is that a clever thing to do? You know, what Costa Coffee did, you know, to say that they are pro-trans, which is obvious, is absolutely fine and all well and good. But to do it in such a gratuitous way as to glorify double mastectomies, I think is horrendous.
But you wouldn't want to see the end of ESG. I mean, there are so many good things that have been born out of that, as you say, that are about ethical sourcing of products, of making sure that we don't take, for example, too much palm oil or whatever it might be in the planet, or make sure that there isn't slave labour in the way you produce your fabrics or your materials. These are all governed by ESG.
Absolutely, and those things should be assumed, implied, regulated even, but not worn on the sleeve of people that sell us consumer goods. As I say, if we want to be preached to, we can go to the Houses of Parliament, Speaker's Corner or church.
You should put church at the top of that list, Russell, if you don't mind me saying.
Depends how religious you are, Steve.
Well, exactly. We should need to change in ways. I think you've got a lot of work to do. Russell and Kyle, thank you both very much.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you this morning. I'm sure you're going to have a view on that, whatever it is. I just say, let's just love one another and be nice.
You've become all holier than thou this morning.
No, but I do.
He's off to church after this.
No, church is on a Wednesday. Church is on a Wednesday. But I do think that we do get a bit... we can be a bit more tolerant, can't we? I certainly get the point of saying, do you need it shoved down your throats? Possibly not. But let's just let people get on with their own lives.
Now, stay with us, because coming up we'll be discussing whether you fancy yourself as a monster hunter. And we're not talking any old monster, we're talking...
the Loch Ness monster. Nessie. We're going to go and find her. We'll tell you how in a minute.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Right, we're going through the papers this morning with the political consultant Emma Burnell and deputy editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Good morning to both of you once again. Emma, we're starting with the Mirror, and this is a story about MOD contracts, in particular Tories slamming P&O, but then gave them £600,000 contract.
Yeah, so we may remember about a year or so ago, there was a really big scandal where P&O sacked their workers illegally. They followed none of the employment law.
Was it actually deemed to be illegal in the end? I can't remember.
I think it was. Yeah, I mean, they literally followed no employment law procedures, and there was a lot of noise made about it from across the political spectrum.
Wasn't the argument they were offshore or something?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Maritime law.
But the people waiting in the minibuses to take over the jobs were not offshore. Anyway, the government made quite a strong, noise about how this shouldn't happen, and it was appalling. Turns out they're still giving them plenty of money in terms of MOD contracts, £600,000 a year to ferry around various bits of kit and personnel.
You don't want a company to go out of business. That's bad for the UK economy.
Well, you can have another company that doesn't break employment law. That gets that money. The money still stays in the UK economy. And the thing is, it's procurement.
But is there another company that can do what P&O are doing in terms of military deployment?
Well, they're not. They're not.
Deployment.
They're literally ferrying equipment to and fro. Yes, there are other companies that could do that. And also, one of the things that you can do with procurement is one of the biggest kind of ways that the government can drive behaviour change. And they just don't seem to have done it at all. I mean, you could signal quite clearly, if you behave like this, you don't get government contracts.
Well, unless you're already working through a 10-year contract.
Well, maybe, but I still don't. I think maybe they should get a taste of their own medicine and have their contracts terminated by text.
Isn't there? Well, look, it's not to justify what they did in any way, shape or form, but we don't want to get into that culture, do we, where someone does something you don't like, then you say, well, you've got to be put out of business. Or we say something you don't like and someone says, well, then therefore you've got to be cancelled.
I completely, individual cancel culture, debanking, all of that, absolutely. But there's a difference between that and literally treating British citizens, as they did, so appallingly, that sacking them by text. That is not the mark of a good, successful company that can run its business well. Therefore, why are they getting government contracts?
Well.
Freddie, you want to talk about holidays, in particular staycations, and the best thing about them.
The best thing about them? Well, there's been a survey, which is in the Daily Mail, of what the Brits like most about staycation, and it turns out that it's beer gardens.
Oh, yeah. And on a nice day.
Yeah. But, I mean, you don't have to have a staycation. There's lots of beer gardens everywhere.
Yeah, but it's having the time to do it.
That's true. That's true. The second thing is eating fish and chips on the beach.
Yeah.
Which is very nice, without seagulls. That's specified.
Well, that's impossible.
I mean, how is that
an impossibility?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't mind.
I live in East London and there's seagulls everywhere.
Cream tea is not on here.
Cream tea should be in there. For me, that's what the definition of a staycation.
I tell you what, I think the best thing about staycationing is not flying.
Yeah.
That's on the list, isn't it?
Yeah. I say this because I came back from France a couple of weeks ago, And on my way to the airport, EasyJet cancelled the flight and then offered one at sort of near midnight.
Yeah.
And I had 2 young children, not giving me compensation. Disgusting.
It's not. That's not a lot of fun, is it? Also, you can take as much luggage as you can fit in the car.
Yeah,
Yep.
I know,
Which
but
is
isn't that
good.
awful when you're all squashed in, the kids are squabbling, you can't escape them.
Me and my best friend go on
I hate
a
the car
UK
journey.
walking holiday every year, and for me, the best thing about staycation, apart from the fact that we end up in a pub, is the beautiful British countryside.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, we've just seen some. We've been to Somerset, Suffolk, Norfolk. Then we ran out of flat counties, so we went to Wales. But absolutely, exploring the British countryside more is something we could all be doing.
Don't restrict yourself to flat counties.
Well, we started, because we were starting on our walking holidays, we wanted to start off gently, but we did end up in very much in the mountains of Wales. So.
OK, good. Please
I think
do hear
there's
it.
so much in this country, in our great British Isles, that we don't appreciate. We're so keen to head off somewhere else just for a bit of sunshine. So much here.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And there's going to be... rest of August is going to be good.
Well, 2 and... Up
Touch
and down.
words.
Better.
Up
Shall I
and
say
down.
better?
Can't be worse, let's put it that way.
Warm and wet, I think, Freddie, is the forecast.
Speaking of wet, water firms can assume climate change will be low to cut costs. This is in the Times, Emma.
Yeah, half of the world's on fire, and yet water companies in the UK, in order to cut their costs, can assume that they don't need to invest in the mitigation measures that we're all going to need, and companies like theirs are particularly going to need, in order to address climate change. I mean, there are definitely things water companies could be doing to cut our bills. Certainly there are things that we all question where our money's going when they're not doing the things that they're currently supposed to do. But I would say that this is not the thing that they should be doing, because ultimately it's going to cost us much, much more if they then have to do these mitigation measures much more quickly, much more expensively, in a shorter timescale, because they haven't done it now.
All right, fair point, and I totally agree with you. However, is part of the argument with this potentially that we're all paying a fortune for our water and not enough's being done on the basic stuff like raw sewage. If they start implementing climate change mitigation, that at the moment is just going to put our bills up.
Well, it might do, but it will over the longer term, it will save us money. And this is the problem, is that we are very short-termist. And we really need to get better at thinking about adaptation, mitigation. Some of the things that have happened are because we're very short-termist. Our lack of reservoirs. We've just been talking about how much it's been raining, but do we have the right storage? No, we don't. So every year there's a hosepipe ban. These are things that we could be doing, but we need to think, instead of thinking 2 to 3 years, we need to think 20 to 30 years.
Agreed.
And speaking of
sensible.
Speaking of staycations, a lot of complaints now about the holidays in Britain is that you're swimming. Sometimes you're near sort of sewage, because the water systems are very antiquated and terrible.
Yeah. Now, Freddie, what's this in The Guardian about what clearly seems to be Britain's best ever pub?
Well, I think pubs are a big theme in the papers today, which I think is telling you something. But Britain's strictest pub landlord, a guy called Sean Collinge in York, has called time on his career, and he's retired. But it seems largely because he's just exhausted with telling people off. Because
no swearing, no stag do's, no fancy dress.
Yeah.
Sounds blooming brilliant.
I think it sounds like a great pub.
It does.
It really is. I really wanted to go there. Although he said a difficult one was somebody put their feet on a stool and he said, you've got to leave. And there was a big fuss about that. And also,
Get out of my pub!
Because he's in York, there's the races, and he says the pre-races is fine, after the races is a nightmare.
Absolutely horrendous.
And he has this good line.
I do sympathise. There's nothing worse than really drunk people.
Yes, but he does run a pub.
Yeah. So, yeah, presumably, as long as he's inebriated, then...
Yeah.
But I like this quote. He says it's after 10 pints of attitude adjustment fluid.
Yes.
They've completely changed.
Yeah.
And so he has to bar them. But it sounds like a great pub, and I hope the person who succeeds him is similarly strict.
What did you just say? There's nothing worse than really drunk people.
Yeah.
Nazanin's wedding, Isabel.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say to you.
Had a good dance.
You had a good dance. You were
Merry.
smashed.
Has that everyone's been drunk at a wedding.
Yeah.
I remember everything.
I agree with you. It's other people being drunk that's the
Yes,
problem.
quite.
It's not.
I mean, the thing about this is it's nice that some pubs are like this. It's nice that some pubs are different. What we want is a choice of pubs for the kind of nights out that we want to go on.
She's giving me the eye now.
She is giving you the eye.
Yeah. You were absolutely smashing. You were going on a holiday
I
that
was
night.
at a wedding. I think you want to be careful, Stephen, because I'm sure she's got stories too.
I don't drink.
Oh, there you go.
I can take the moral high ground. I don't drink anymore.
Woman never tells any stories.
Anymore. That's why I gave up the drinking, though, because I used to get far too smashed. So,
yeah, I've been there.
But, yeah, it's terrible. Terrible. Can we just quickly do this one, just in 30 seconds? Race for chips in the FT, because I'm thinking salt and vinegar.
Yes, computer chips.
Oh.
Less tasty.
Yeah, well, I thought we'd end on a very serious story. It's obviously the chip wars between China and America is a very, very big story. The Biden administration is trying to limit China's access to chips, but the big new chips are called NVIDIA chips because they work with AI very well. China is massively trying to buy up. They've seen a sort of gap in the supply. Four Chinese firms are buying $5 billion worth of these chips, and the Biden administration is sort of trying to catch up and stop China getting hold of them because
I can understand why.
It's really it is actually the most important story of our time in a way. Who controls computer
Well, you would
chips?
choose that for the last story of the last paper
I
review
just
this
started with
morning.
pubs, and then we move on to trade wars.
The most important story of our time. And on that note,
It's fantastic. You go to the pub and then you have chips.
Fair point. Emma, Freddie, thanks very much indeed.
Great pleasure.
Right, we're talking all things football now. The FIFA Women's World Cup is continuing this weekend with England taking on Colombia in the quarter-finals after surviving a scare against Nigeria in the round of 16.
Yeah, so how far can the Lionesses go? Let's talk to one former Lioness, Leanne Sanderson, who joins us now from glorious Milton Keynes, where I shall be heading back to straight after the show. Leanne, look, first and foremost, what do you reckon our chances are?
Yeah, I think obviously with regards to, first and foremost, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
I think our chances bracket, you know, you look at the other side, there's Spain, Netherlands, France. They have to play against each other. So we are lined up to play Australia. If we win this one against Colombia, Australia play France in our bracket and we play against them in the semi-finals. So, you know, the chances are high. I don't think we played our best so far, but at the same time, we're still in the tournament. US Women's National Team are out. They were going for their third World Cup in a row, winning the World Cup their third in a row. Germany are out, Canada are out, you know, Brazil are out. So the chances are definitely there. And obviously with the Lionesses winning the Euros last summer, everybody falling in love with them, I think the time is now. So it's definitely there for the taking. And with regards to all the other teams being out.
There's always this tradition, isn't there, though, just as we all get our hopes built up, then we somehow just can't quite do it. The kind of choking thing kicks in. A lot of people have been saying the Lionesses so far haven't been roaring through the tournament. There was the stamping incident in the last game against Nigeria. Is that a setback, or are we just quietly working our way through this tournament this time?
I think it's completely different this time around. I think when you look at choking, I think that because we won on penalties, I think they're rewriting that rule, to be honest. I think obviously Lauren James picking up that red card doesn't really make sense to me why she would do that, but everyone's human. I don't think they need to do public apologies because someone's got a red card. These things happen in the men's game every single week. It's not right, but it happens. So I think they're quietly going about their business. We're in a good place. We just need to play way better than we have been, but we're still in the tournament. We could be far worse off being out of the tournament already, as the USA are.
What is all this doing, do you think, as we build this momentum, as, you know, head into the last 8 and hopefully take it all the way? What's it doing for women's football? I mean, it has been, behind the whole game, there's been a growing momentum for a number of years, but it seems to be picking up pace now.
Yeah, it does. And I think, obviously, people talk to me. I only retired 3 years ago. And the misconception is that the quality has got better. No, the visibility is just there. You saw at the Euros the last summer. There's billboards on Tower Bridge, London Bridge, and all over England, really. So it's like anything. If you don't know about something, how are you going to go and watch it? So I think the fact the Lionesses won, I think they're winning over a lot of people that are still sceptical of the women's game because there are still people out there. But I can tell you now, there was way more people messaging me after the Lionesses won saying they want to work in the women's game than there ever has been because they can see it growing.
But how much more work do you think the FA needs to do? Because I was just reminded of the fact that you got 50 caps. And you got forgotten about by the FA a couple of years ago when they were remembering and marking women's football. They forgot to include you. They didn't invite you to the event. I mean, there's stuff like that where you just think it's the institution itself which just isn't helping the cause.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I'm always open to people, rectifying their mistakes. Obviously, that was a situation that hurt me, and it still probably sticks with me every single day the way my international career ended. But, I don't hold any bitterness or resentment. It's just the way it is. But I work behind the scenes closely. I've been to the House of Parliament twice now, for meetings about this type of stuff. And I think the FA have learnt from their mistakes. And I think now, they've got a coach in there in Serena Wiegmann that I wish I could almost come out of retirement to play for her. And you have to have coaches and organisations where people understand these things happen to me, but they don't happen to other players. Now, it's not rocket science to work out why. And I think seeing is believing. And I think even seeing people like myself on the television, young girls can aspire to be that. When I was growing up, look at all these pictures we're seeing now. When I was growing up, I never had those players to look up to. I used to look up to Serena and Venus Williams, who are amazing, but they're tennis players, and players like David Beckham, because there just wasn't that visibility. So, yes, I think the FA have learned from their mistakes, and hopefully, I can make it better for everybody else in the future. Unfortunately, I have to go through these things, it seems, for it to be better for everybody else. But that's just the cards I've been dealt with.
You're a trailblazer. You're a trailblazer, and hopefully the Lionesses will be at this World Cup again. Just tell us one team, if you were to pick out one team that are really going to be the ones to beat in the rest of this tournament if we are to go all the way.
Yeah, I think Japan will get there, and I think the Netherlands. So it's about, with regards to Japan or the Netherlands, I think they're going to be difficult, but I think England can definitely do it, I believe.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Leanne, really good to see you this morning. I'll see you at MK Centre about 11:30 for a coffee if you want.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realise you were from here, so we'll definitely have to meet up.
Oh, definitely. Really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
She's great, isn't she?
Very uplifting. Such a positive role model. And she's right, so many young girls will be looking up to the Lionesses in all of this.
Right, let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Here's Greg.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. So the day ahead is looking fine and dry for many, plenty of sunny spells, feeling much warmer than it has done for many weeks now. And this morning, yes, there is a little bit of low cloud initially, but this should lift and break, and most places having a fine day ahead. Plenty of blue skies. Yes, the cloud will come and go at times across northern England, parts of Scotland, and then will thicken across some western parts later on. Perhaps an afternoon shower developing over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, but most places dry, and those temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s. 28 to 29 Celsius possible towards the southeast this afternoon. We've not seen those temperatures for quite some time. Into the evening, though, we do see a weather front moving into the west, and this will give some rain to Northern Ireland and then parts of Wales, western Scotland, southwest England, slowly pushing its way north and eastwards through the night. Some of this rain could be heavy at times, particularly across Scotland, very little in the south, and another warm, muggy night to come. Temperatures at minimum around 17 or 18 degrees. So a bit of a cloudier start to Friday. There will be some bright or sunny spells. Rain, though, across northern England and Scotland. This pushing out the way, and then it will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers across the country. Showers most frequent in the brisk breeze towards the north and the west, some of these heavy at times. Some places will stay dry, and in the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, temperatures around 25 or 26 Celsius. So still feeling quite warm here, a little fresher towards the northwest.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up, the latest on one of the most serious data breaches in the history of Northern Ireland.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hey, good morning. Very nearly 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 10th of August. Today, a second data breach in Northern Ireland. Now the Chief Constable under fire over concerns that police officers are in real danger.
Should ditching the European Convention on Human Rights be at the heart of the Tories' re-election campaign? That's what some cabinet members are demanding of the PM. But would it solve the immigration crisis?
And are you a monster hunter? Do you want to look for Nessie? The Loch Ness Centre are calling on volunteers to join the search. We'll tell you why.
And as always, we'll bring you your latest forecast.
Hello, we'll see temperatures rising through the course of the day today. Find out exactly how high later on in the programme with me.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Isabel Webster, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Have you ever looked for Nessie?
No, because she doesn't exist.
Of course she does. Of course she does.
I'm afraid
she's
not.
there somewhere. The search is ongoing. If you want to go up to the Loch Ness Centre, they're organising a big search. Brilliant. They'll find her. They will. Look at you. You're such a cynic. Oh, no, very excited about that one.
You think that they can send people into space, but they haven't been able to search a little loch?
So it's very deep, the Loch Ness.
We could get down
very
to
deep.
the bloomin' bottom of the sea. We can get down to the bottom of the loch.
Oh, no, it's more difficult than you think. Prove me right. GBviews at gbnews.com. Have you ever seen her? Have you ever had a glimpse? Bet some of you have.
Have you?
No, I've looked a lot, though.
Have you been there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Why does this not surprise me?
Yeah, but I haven't seen anything yet. But I live in hope. I live in hope. I do. Not much hope in Northern Ireland, actually, to be fair, at the minute. The Police Federation there says urgent answers are required after details emerged of a second major data leak containing the names of more than 200 serving officers and staff.
It comes after the worst security breach in Northern Irish history, where the names and locations of the entire police force were mistakenly put online for 3 hours.
Let's talk to our Northern Ireland correspondent, Dougie Beattie, who joins us now. I mean, this is a nightmare, Dougie, not only working out what has gone wrong, what has happened, and who needs to be responsible, but, of course, the everyday lives of thousands of people now really affected.
Absolutely, Stephen. I mean, we're back to the bad old days here where, I mean, friends of mine would never have said that their mothers or fathers worked in the police service because they were afraid of being targeted. Don't forget, there was over 300 police officers killed in Northern Ireland in the height of the Troubles. Only last February, we had DCI John Caldwell attempting his life. And the policing board where we stand outside now, not this particular location, but the one before this, actually had a bomb put outside it by the IRA. So police officers are really still being targeted, and for the details and such detailed details that were put online. I mean, we had the surname, the first initial, the location, the service number, you know, all the details that you would just need to go to something like the electoral register and put the rest of it together, jigsaw data. Those officers are now really feeling quite cautious about their lives. They'll be back to checking their car every morning, starting it with a door opening. They will be looking very much, was the gate closed at the top of the driveway when they left? Had somebody else been there? That is a terrible way to live your life. And unfortunately, that data breach has brought a lot of that back. And to pour more fuel onto the flames, it turns out that at the start of July, there was a laptop taken from a car, a private laptop or a private car in Newton Abbey. It was a police laptop, and it turns out that it has the details of 200 officers on it. So the Chief Constable has come back from his holidays today to face his political masters here at the policing board behind us. But really, those political masters aren't in control of this. The ball is really at the foot of the Police Federation at this point, because the Police Federation are the ones that have or want questions to be answered for his rank and file officers.
OK, Dougie, thank you.
Well, let's speak now to the former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker, who joins us in the studio. Good morning to you, Norman. First of all, your thoughts on what's been a significant data breach in Northern Ireland and serious concerns, not only for those affected, but also, you know, for the job of the top brass there.
Well, indeed, it's very serious indeed, and the situation in Northern Ireland is less stable than it was. Brexit, I think, has put pressure on the Good Friday Agreement, particularly through the DUP not wishing to be part of an arrangement at Stormont, and that's dysfunctional at the moment between the DUP and Sinn Féin. But, you know, there's a question about this laptop. I mean, what on earth was someone doing with a laptop with 200 names and details in their car? I mean, from my experience at the Home Office, that sort of material should never, ever leave HQ. It should have been kept at police headquarters. There's no reason for that being in someone's car.
It doesn't need to leave HQ. They're releasing it anyway.
Well, I mean, indeed, they are now.
This is the problem.
Well, they are now. That's a double breach. I mean, it does suggest to me that there's serious questions to be answered about security in Northern Ireland.
I tell you what, though, with all the... And you raise absolutely valid points, right? And heads could well roll over this and all the rest of it. But that doesn't address the real issue, does it? That you've got in excess of 10,000 names released, and they're out there. The danger is there now. What on earth do you do to tackle it?
Well, you can't do very much to tackle it. I mean, in the same way as, you know, somebody wants to bomb the London Underground, you can't really stop them doing it. You can take some sensible precautions. You can put CCTV and matters like that. You can improve security of people's houses in terms of Northern Ireland to make sure they've got proper advice on how to protect themselves, to make sure windows are bulletproof, that sort of thing. But ultimately, you know, if information is released and somebody wants to use it, they will use it. And you cannot protect thousands of people on a 24-hour basis. You can't.
Do you think that sacking the Chief Inspector there is the answer in all of this? Or perhaps that could be you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Well, I think there are questions to be answered as to why the situation has arisen, and that needs to be an investigation to that. And anything which preempts that would be unfortunate, because it may well be that the individual concerned is not responsible. We just don't know yet. Let's find out the facts. But what I would say is it's very easy to call for someone to be sacked or to be replaced, and that gives a certain satisfaction on an immediate basis to people. But that may not be the right answer. If it destabilises the police even further, that may not be the good outcome.
Can I ask you about the European Convention on Human Rights? A third of the Cabinet want out of it, apparently. It's a good campaigning issue for the general election.
Well, it may be a good campaigning issue, but it's deeply flawed, as a number of Conservative MPs themselves have said. I see Bob Neal, the chair of the Justice Committee, coming out and criticising it. You have to remember... But
isn't the ECHR flawed?
No, I don't think it is. I think you have to remember where it came from. It came from the fallout from the Second World War. It was partly created by Britain, as a matter of fact, to try to make sure that what happened in the 1930s couldn't happen again. That's the origin of it, to make sure individual rights are protected. And it's not just the rights, by the way, of people coming into the country. It's our rights as British citizens, our ability to go to the courts against perhaps an overweening government at some point, and to say, no, the government shouldn't be doing that. We have our rights in a democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of association, things that GBNews regularly champions, quite rightly, and we want those protected. And if you abandon the ECHR, you take away the rights of British people.
But is there not a possibility that we could actually stand up for ourselves and have our own set of human rights and uphold those without needing that jurisdiction above?
Well, you know, who says that? Russia says that, doesn't it, about its citizens? Belarus says that about its citizens, that we have our own system. And look what the government does there. It tramples over the human rights of their own citizens. No, we need to have a robust system which is able to challenge the government of the day here in the UK and say, no, that's not right for British people. And the ECHR is that mechanism. Of course, it's reached judgments which some of us may disagree with over the years. There's an issue, for example, about when and how prisoners should be allowed to vote. That was one of the issues that the ECHR dealt with. So we wouldn't agree with all their decisions, but they are an essential bulwark in a democracy against an overweening government, and we need to keep it.
OK. Norman Baker, as always, thanks very much.
Now, shocking new figures revealed that a Treasury fund, originally designed to profit from the Bank of England's quantitative easing programme, has turned from a £73.6 billion asset into a £177.6 billion liability.
Well, here to tell us more about it is the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray. Good morning to you, Mr Murray. You've spotted this huge liability. What would Labour do about it?
Well, look, we know that people across the country are already being squeezed by this seemingly never-ending cost of living crisis under the Conservatives. And these figures today show that people face yet another hit because of economic mismanagement by this government. You know, if you trace back where this came from, it was first began by George Osborne in 2013 when he changed the rules about the Treasury profiting from the value of the assets. The situation started to get worse under Rishi Sunak when he was as Chancellor, but he was very complacent about it. And then obviously under Kwasi Kwarteng, crisis became an emergency. And now we have this astonishing and shocking situation where what was the biggest asset on the Treasury's balance sheet 3 years ago is now its biggest liability. And what that means in practical terms for people across the country is that British people are going to once again pick up the price for the Conservative economic failure.
Right, but so if I just come back to the question, though, what would you do to sort this out? Assuming you were to win power next year and you've identified this problem, what's your solution?
Well, at the absolute heart of what we are saying we would do in power is economic responsibility to build a more resilient economy, to build a more stable economy, and to make sure we get our economy back on track and growing again. And, you know, I think what this really shows is the kind of the recklessness and the mismanagement over the last 13 years. And that's something that we've put at the heart of our offer that we would change by making clear that we would be economically responsible and stable in government.
But, Mr Murray, this is a red herring, isn't it? I mean, you say the British public, left to pick up the pieces, pick up the price tag of this. The Labour Party's sort of listed that it's the equivalent to best part of £9,000 per person in the country. we haven't lost money at all. It's not a black hole, is it? The value has decreased, which is a perfectly valid worry. But until you try and do anything with that money, if we sit there, let it grow again, we're sitting pretty, aren't we?
Well, alongside the decrease in the value of the assets, so the assets now become a huge liability. There's also been changes to the calculations about the lifetime cost going from profit into a cost to the taxpayer. So it's very clear that this fall in the asset value, such a dramatic fall in the asset value, will have an impact and will have a cost on the British taxpayer, because at the end of the day, it's our money. We end up paying for it, and this will be a liability which hangs over us, which means that ultimately British people will have to pay for it through their taxes, or the government won't be able to do other stuff that we think should be done instead.
I just wanted to ask you, whilst we've got you, about some breaking news that we're just hearing. Government figures have been released and they show the number of people crossing the English Channel on small boats in the last 5.5 years could have passed 100,000 following fresh arrivals on Thursday. They're saying that as of Tuesday, 99,960 people arrived in the UK after making that journey, and RNLI lifeboats were spotted, bringing dozens of those ashore. Your reaction to that milestone, please, Mr Murray?
Well, look, I think, any milestone in terms of numbers of people crossing the channel really underscores what a huge problem this is. I don't think anyone needs any convincing that people crossing the channel has surged in recent years, that it's a really significant issue and needs to be tackled. What people want to see, though, is real solutions to tackling this problem. And that's why we've said that we would go after the people smugglers, the criminal gangs who are bringing people over in the first place, to make sure that we cut that off at source. And make sure that they can't profit from people crossing the channel on boats, and obviously, leading to the deaths of some people when those boats sink in the channel. Now, what we really need is that kind of solution alongside tackling the backlog in the asylum and immigration system, which we know is out of control, which we know is causing the government to use expensive hotels and barges and other forms of accommodation. We need that plan to get on top of the situation, because frankly, the Conservatives have presided over 13 years of failure on this, and they've created this chaos which now needs to be fixed.
Yeah, well, isn't that what the government's doing in terms of the deal with Turkey? That's all about tackling the criminal gangs, isn't it?
Well, look, they've had 13 years, and they keep bringing back new bits of legislation. They keep making new announcements. They have headline-grabbing gimmicks here, there and everywhere, trying to distract from the central problem here, which is that the backlog has gone up dramatically. There has been a huge increase in the number of people coming over on channel crossings. They have a serious and organised crime strategy that doesn't even mention channel crossings. They just haven't got on top of this issue at all. And I think after 13 years, people have given up hope that they might have it within them to get on top of it. And that's why we need a new government, a Labour government, to really get on top of this.
James Murray, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Well, on that breaking news, let's talk to our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's here in the studio. I mean, this is a milestone figure, isn't it?
It's huge.
And it's going to emphasise, actually, how important an election issue this is going to be.
Yeah, listen, it's uppermost in the minds of many people across the country, because they see it on a daily basis with asylum seekers being put in hotels in towns and cities right across the UK. So this is not just an issue that's confined to Kent and the crossings around Dover and that area. It affects people right across the country, and this 100,000 figure, we've been waiting for a number of days for that landmark figure to be reached. We can confirm that this morning now, 5 small boats took advantage of a break in the weather. We've had atrocious conditions over recent days. 5 small boats have made it, 250 people have come across, and that takes us over the 100,000 mark since this crisis began, really, in 2018. You'll remember back in 2018, there was only just over 200 people that crossed in a few small boats back then, but then it just began to take off, and year after year it doubled and tripled, and there's no sign of it abating at all, despite the Prime Minister saying it's one of his key pledges, one of his 5 key pledges of this government is to stop the small boats. The only thing that's been stopping the small boats is the weather conditions.
Well, interesting also to see the reports that the RNLI were helping, assisting many of those this morning, as you talk about those boats arriving on UK shores today. This morning, the RNLI back out there. There have been criticism levelled at the RNLI, not least by Nigel Farage. They've been a taxi service, effectively, for illegal migrants.
Yeah, and the RNLI would absolutely deny that and say that they have a duty to respond to these less than seaworthy boats coming across in often less than ideal conditions. I've got more on this, actually. There are reports now that 6 migrants might be in the water that have either been washed overboard or fallen overboard from this boat.
Gosh.
So there's a full emergency response to Dungeness, just down the Kent coast from Dover. We'll update you when we get more details on that. But what happens, of course, is because the weather has been so bad of late, it's been largely impassable for these small boats to get across the channel because the waves, anything over a metre or so in height, and it's very difficult for them. So when the weather abates to the point they think they can make it, they push off. But it's still not flat calm out there. No. And it's, the wave might hit them. It could be the wake from one of the big passing container ships. It's a busy shipping lane as well. But this 100,000 figure, it is, I think, a very significant major milestone that will no doubt just set fire again to this debate. There'll be a huge national discussion now.
OK, Mark, as always, thank you.
Now, we're asking after this whether or not you fancied yourself as a bit of a monster hunter, because the Loch Ness Centre are calling for volunteers to join their search for the beast.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Do you want to find Nessie? Yes, of course you do. Let's find out how you do it from Paul Nixon from the Loch Ness Centre, which is opening its doors to help us all search for the beast. Morning, Paul. What's going on?
Good morning to you there. Yes, we are going to be conducting the largest surface watch of Loch Ness since 1972. So we're calling out for volunteers to come and help with the hunt for probably one of our longest standing mysteries that's still going today.
I mean, it's a mystery because it's nonsense, isn't it?
Isabel.
There's no such thing as a Loch
Isabel,
Ness
I am
monster,
so
is there?
disappointed you think
I'm
that. 'Cause
sorry.
I know if you were to take a trip to Loch Ness, take a walk along the banks, you'd have your eyes on the water. And it doesn't matter if you're a skeptic, a cynic, or a true believer. Whenever anyone visits Loch Ness, they are looking for the Loch Ness monster. You can't help it. It's in your DNA.
Absolutely, and I tell you what, it's a beautiful place to go. And of course, Nessie is in there somewhere. Far too many sightings for it all to be made up. You never know your luck, Paul. This might be the time you get some decent quality images.
Yes, I think everything to now is pointed us towards a phenomena in the area. You know, from 565 AD to St. Columba being written up in a religious text that he banished a beast in the loch, to Aldi Mackay's sighting 90 years ago in 1933, which really kicked off this global phenomenon. And there's not a corner of the planet you can visit where someone hasn't heard of the Loch Ness monster.
This is true. It's good for tourism, and I wish you well in your hunt, and I suspect you're going to need it. But that's not to say I don't think it sounds like good sport, and I hope everyone has a great time having a good look for Nessie.
Oh, I'll tell you what, to sit on the banks of Loch Ness with a cup of tea and a box of shortbread.
Nothing nicer.
Perfect. Paul Nixon, thank you
Thanks,
very
Paul.
much indeed.
That's it from us on Breakfast Today. Up next, it's Britain's Newsroom with Martin and Emily. Let's see what they've got in store for us all today.
It is indeed. What have we got coming up, Martin?
Well, following those breaking news figures, 100,000 have arrived by illegal dinghies since 2018. We'll have malt white all across that. Does it prove that we've finally lost control of our borders?
And would you vote Conservative if they put ditching the ECHR at the heart of their election campaign?
And finally, is it time to boot Diane Abbott out of politics after her outrageous attack on Lee Anderson?
Yet another tweet from Diane. Oh dear. Well, all of that to come and more, of course, after your all-important weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. So the day ahead is looking fine and dry for many. Plenty of sunny spells, feeling much warmer than it has done for many weeks now. And this morning, yes, there is a little bit of low cloud initially, but this should lift and break. And most places having a fine day ahead. Plenty of blue skies. Yes, the cloud will come and go at times across northern England, parts of Scotland, and then will thicken across some western parts later on. Perhaps an afternoon shower developing over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, but most places dry, and those temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s, 28 to 29 Celsius possible towards the southeast this afternoon. We've not seen those temperatures for quite some time. Into the evening, though, we do see a weather front moving into the west, and this will give some rain to Northern Ireland and then parts of Wales, western Scotland, southwest England, slowly pushing its way north and eastwards through the night. Some of this rain could be heavy at times, particularly across Scotland, very little in the south, and another warm, muggy foggy night to come. Temperatures minimum around 17 or 18 degrees. So a bit of a cloudier start to Friday. There will be some bright or sunny spells. Rain, though, across northern England and Scotland. This pushing out the way, and then it will be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers across the country. Showers most frequent in the brisk breeze towards the north and the west, some of these heavy at times. Some places will stay dry, and in the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, temperatures around 25 or 26 Celsius. So still feeling quite warm here, a little fresher towards the northwest.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.